The dentist recoils in horror, his instruments clattering to the ground as the patient's thrashing legs kick at the table, sending equipment flying. He's screaming, screeching in agony as the things in his mouth keep pushing out. They're not teeth, they're too thin, slim, and pointed like needles, but pulsing and wriggling like living things. Another stray kick connects with the dentist, pushing him back on the wheels of his stool, which then slides out from under him and sends him down onto the floor too. He scrambles back, hiding under a nearby desk as he watches, trembling with the icy shudder of fear, eyes locked on the patient and the things crawling out of his mouth. There's dozens of them, maybe hundreds of needle-like protrusions seemingly trying to claw their way out, like the man's face is determined to tear itself into pieces through some relentless force of spite, so powerful that it's called forth these inhuman spines to do the job. One pushes at the soft tissue of the patient's cheek, rupturing through from underneath, punctuated by a rush of red and another screech of agonizing pain. In his desperation, the patient is fumbling with his open wound with one hand, staining his palm while trying to work the tiny rinsing sink next to the dental chair. The tiny jet of water does little to soothe the injury, only washes away the copper taste for a second before yet another spike splits open the man's lip. On the floor, hunched under the desk, the dentist can't move, can't do anything, save for keeping his surgical mask firmly against his face with trembling fingers. The patient lurches over, screaming louder, tears streaming down his face that's quickly becoming less and less recognizable as human below the nose. For the first time in his entire career, the dentist is scared for his life. A routine procedure, that was all it was meant to be. Some nasty pain in his jaw, the patient had said. Now, that same man looks more like a monster as the living spikes continue to poke their way out from his gums, hooking through his cheeks and lips as if trying to climb out of his face like the legs of an angry spider. Then comes the sound of bone cracking, splitting in two, followed by a hollow sob of pain from the patient. The noise makes the dentist's stomach lurch, as if he's going to be sick any second. And as the patient crawls towards him, it only gets worse. The man's face is covered in tears and sweat. Blood and drool pour from his mouth. The sounds of his jaw cracking and breaking get louder, each time making him writhe and cry at the agony. The patient crawls to the cowering dentist, the lower half of his face a mess of broken bone and spine stabbing through his skin. He makes a sound, a garbled, half-wailed noise distorted by the pain and his breaking jaw. It almost sounds like help. Then the next crunch happens, forcing the jaw open. The patient's cheeks split like wet paper, torn apart by the pointed ends of the growing spikes. He drops lifelessly to the floor, all of a sudden still and silent, where only seconds ago he was screaming in pain and fear. The dentist crawls apprehensively out from under the desk and stares in disbelief at the sickening sight of the man's body before him. They're still moving. They're still wriggling out of the bloodied, broken half of the face that the patient has left. Whatever these growths were, these spines, they're alive. A few are literally climbing out of the dead man's cheeks, like insects, crawling erratically over his glassy, open but empty eyes. The dentist hears the muffled noise of commotion from outside his office door, of police arriving at the scene, no doubt after his assistant overheard the agonized screams and called the emergency services. But part of the dentist doesn't register the sounds as real. He ignores it, too fixated on the things now climbing their way out of the dead patient on the floor. They look like toothpicks, slender and pointed at each side, but their movement is quick, definitely insect-like, but also familiar. Then one lifts off the patient's lifeless face into the air, hovering around the office, tapping against the window. Flies. They're like flies. A sudden, piercing cold shard of fear strikes the dentist. The door. He can't let anyone in because the flies might get out. Then his mind wanders to the others in the waiting room, the patient's friends, the other tourists all complaining of pain in their jaws. They were carrying more of these things. They'd contracted parasites. In the blur that follows, the dentist remembers his first port of call had been to contact the CDC, warn them there was a potentially dangerous parasitic infestation in the area. Then, the other group shows up not long after. Some secretive specialized division. They never give names, never flash badges, or even say who they represent, but they talk like experts. And within hours, not even days, they've made it all disappear. None of the tourists meet the same fate as the patient who died. Nobody from the area comes into the dentist's practice with the same symptoms, or living spines protruding from their gums. But he still can't sleep. The dentist still can't get the image of the patient's face out of his head, especially in his nightmares. Weeks pass, turn into months that snowball into years. Early retirement and closing down the practice do little to make the bad dreams stop, and nothing provides answers to the lingering questions. What were those spiny parasites? Where had they come from? And who were those shady types who'd made it all go away? The dentist sits at a table alone, eating freshly cooked fish in the corner of an old restaurant he started coming to as a way to try and forget. Enjoy a new lease on life. That's what everyone told him he should do now that he didn't have to stare down plaque-riddled mouths and pull-rotting cavities anymore. Then, something pokes at his inner lip. The dentist freezes, heart twinging in his chest. The feeling instantly conjures up the familiar, frightening face of the patient. Is this how it starts? His tongue probes at the small, sharp object in his mouth. It's a tiny fish bone lodged between his bottom teeth. The dentist breathes a sigh of relief, chuckling softly to himself, feeling his quickened pulse calming back down. He wiggles the fish bone, trying to dislodge it, but it's wedged in tight. So he reaches a hand out to a small pot on the table and picks up a toothpick. Of all the anomalies kept securely contained by the SCP Foundation, few are as vile and unpleasant as SCP-611. For reasons that will quickly become apparent, the personnel at the Foundation have taken to referring to the creatures designated under SCP-611 as the Parasitic Toothpicks. This is a subspecies of Dermatobia hominis, otherwise known as the human botfly. Normal, non-anomalous botflies belong to a family of insects called Ostridae that tend to lay eggs internally within mammals. Some Ostridae larvae will grow within the flesh of their host, others will develop within their gut. Dermatobia hominis is the only species within this family known to routinely parasitize human beings, or rather, that was until the discovery of SCP-611. While other botflies are very recognizably insects, where SCP-611 differs is primarily in its use of a unique, highly specific form of camouflage to implant its eggs into human hosts. As their colloquial moniker implies, instances of SCP-611 will appear to the untrained eye to be ordinary wooden toothpicks. It is unclear at what point in their life cycle SCP-611 takes on this appearance. However, once it does, it will fly around in search of a supply of toothpicks. Upon finding some, it will land near or actually in amongst other toothpicks, at which point the SCP-611 instance will shed its wings, allowing its camouflaged appearance to become even more effective. After this has happened, the fly will enter a passive state, resting in a dormant condition for a maximum of 40 days. If the presence of an SCP-611 instance remains undetected for the duration of this amount of time, then all its life signs will cease and the fly will perish. However, should someone pick up and attempt to use what they think is a toothpick but is actually an instance of SCP-611, then the next part of the parasite's life cycle will commence. The SCP-611 species survives by laying their eggs inside the gums of unsuspecting human hosts. Someone who has come into contact with an SCP-611 instance will initially notice no signs of invasion, nor will they experience any adverse side effects, at least not until after several days. Anywhere between 4 days and a full week after contact, the SCP-611 eggs that have been deposited into a person's mouth will hatch. The newly hatched larvae will then burrow into the host's jaw, causing severe discomfort to whoever has been unlucky enough to be implanted with the eggs. The pain caused by the burrowing SCP-611 larvae is sharp, intense, and continuous. Although given the oral location that they hatch in, this sensation can be wrongly attributed to toothache, a cavity, or some other form of pain caused by a dental issue. As the larvae burrow deeper into a person's jaw, they leave behind open internal wounds. These oral injuries can be prone to serious infections given the sheer number of germs in the human mouth. When experiencing the pain of newborn SCP-611 instances burrowing into the jaw, what is actually being felt by the human host is the larvae feeding. Once they have consumed a sufficient amount, the larvae will then exhibit another significant difference from other species of botfly. They enter a pupa stage, between the immature and mature points of their life cycle, similar to the pupa seen when some caterpillars mature into butterflies. However, in the case of SCP-611, the parasitic toothpick does not require a protective outer shell, a chrysalis, during its pupa stage. It is protected by the body of its human host. As a larva matures into a fully grown SCP-611 fly, its body will grow longer and its outer exoskeleton will harden. This continues until the now adult anomalous botfly's body is long and thin and sharp enough to punch through the skin of the human being it has grown inside. This is, by all accounts, excruciatingly painful for those unfortunate to be used as hosts for developing SCP-611 instances. The pointed, toothpick-like parasites will extrude from beneath the outer surface of the jaw until they have pierced the skin of the host's face, allowing the newly matured SCP-611 fly to now exit its host. Upon reaching maturity, adult SCP-611 still possess their wings, only losing them once having found a suitable supply of toothpicks to hide amongst. Once they have exited their host, the parasitic toothpicks will hover freely through the air, seeking out other members of its species to mate with. There are no discernible differences between any two instances of SCP-611, suggesting that each individual of these botflies is neither male nor female. SCP Foundation researchers have consulted experts in entomology and even those within the Foundation's own ranks who specialize in anomalous parasitology, and all evidence correlates. This is widely considered to be highly unusual for members of an insect population. Given that the SCP-611 species doesn't appear to exhibit any indicators of any biological sexes, this has led to speculation among research personnel that these parasites may not be a naturally occurring phenomenon. Further investigation proposals are still pending review and approval from the Ethics Committee and the O5 Council, with some Foundation staff seeking permission to look further into the origins of SCP-611. There has been growing concern that some person, group of interest, or other entity could be responsible for genetically engineering the parasitic toothpicks, or creating this botfly subspecies through some other anomalous means. It seems implausible that these parasites were able to adapt and evolve to perfectly imitate toothpicks, especially since humans have only used these in the previous few centuries. Many at the Foundation consider it to be highly suspect that an entire subspecies could develop in that short amount of time, unless there was some direct involvement by another party guiding the evolution of SCP-611. Further testing with SCP-611 is still required in order to determine whether their evolution occurred naturally or as the result of deliberate tampering or engineering. However, in the interim, this has done little to belay speculation among Foundation staff. The theories range wildly among different personnel. One states that SCP-611 could be the result of intentional, experimental crossbreeding between botflies performed by members of the Deer College, given their subdimensional locale and teaching of anomalous sciences. Others have posited that the parasitic toothpicks were developed by Prometheus Labs Incorporated, who have a long history of creating anomalies without the Foundation's knowledge or oversight. Regardless of who exactly created them, the mature instances of SCP-611 need to be successful in finding a partner in order for the species to survive. It only has a short time in which to achieve this, though, as the primary adult phase of their life cycle only lasts for a maximum of 72 hours in total, during which time they need to seek out another of their kind, then carry eggs to a suitable place to camouflage themselves. Anomalous entomology researchers at the Foundation have suggested that their rapid life cycle after leaving their human hosts might mean that there are a larger population of SCP-611 instances than initially thought. However, the location where their presence is thought to be more concentrated has been redacted from the SCP Foundation's files. The SCP Foundation first encountered the parasitic toothpicks at an undisclosed time post the year 2000. The exact location of the initial encounter with the anomalous botflies still remains classified, although it has been confirmed to have occurred somewhere in New Mexico. Whether this is the point of origin for SCP-611 is still widely debated, however. There are known to be other species of botflies documented in New Mexico, in particular, those that lay eggs in rabbits, but the presence of other botfly species that use human hosts for their larvae is unconfirmed. Before the Foundation arrived at the scene, a local dentist had been contacted by a group of tourists. They had only recently arrived in New Mexico, and all complained of suffering from severe tooth pain and intense stabbing sensations in their jaws. It is still unknown where these tourists had been prior to their arrival in New Mexico. However, given that they were all infected when they contacted the dentist, it stands to reason they were infected either on arrival to the state or just prior to traveling there. Discovering that each of the tourists was carrying parasite larvae, the horrified dentist quickly contacted the Centers for Disease Control. They were quick to ascertain that this infestation was far beyond even their expertise, prompting SCP agents embedded within the CDC to contact the Foundation. Stepping in to take control of the developing situation, the SCP Foundation was able to isolate the tourist group and offer them treatment. The SCP-611 larvae were removed before they could cause any permanent damage or fatal infections in the hosts. Through interviews with the tourists, Foundation agents were able to trace the outbreak of parasitic toothpicks to a local restaurant, which had been unwittingly playing host to SCP-611 instances for approximately a month. Every employee at the restaurant was rounded up and given Class A amnestics before each of their patrons also received a visit from the Foundation. Those who had also been made into hosts for SCP-611 eggs or larvae were similarly treated and then given amnestics to forget their contact with the parasites. While the vast majority of larvae were removed before they were able to fully mature and leave their hosts, some had already caused extensive damage. Multiple deaths were recorded in the area, attributed to a subsequent SCP-611 infestation that had occurred. Ever since their discovery, SCP-611 instances have been kept securely contained by the SCP Foundation. In accordance with special containment procedures, any instances of SCP-611 are to be sealed within their enclosure at all times. In order to keep the parasites alive, the specimens are provided a single piece of rotting meat per week, as per their dietary requirements. Based on the findings of Foundation researchers, the parasitic toothpicks get the most sufficient nutrition from beef tongue that has been aged at room temperature for around 2 weeks. The enclosure is overseen and maintained by a single SCP Foundation technician that specializes in insect care. When performing any and all duties within the enclosure, technicians are required to wear a full biohazard suit at all times in order to prevent a potential SCP-611 infestation. The temperature of the enclosure is to be lowered to 10 degrees Celsius during routine maintenance, so as to lower the activity level of SCP-611 instances inside. Then, afterwards, when the technician has concluded their maintenance, their biohazard suits are to be thoroughly sterilized, and with good reason. One recorded failure to follow the SCP-611 containment procedures took place on an undisclosed date referred to as Incident 611-1. According to the Foundation Incident Report, this occurred when a technician's biohazard suit wasn't correctly sterilized following maintenance on the SCP-611 enclosure. Thanks to the lack of proper sterilization, 3 instances of SCP-611 were able to escape containment. Fortunately, 2 were found quickly afterwards, seemingly attempting to get back to the other specimens, as the 2 escaped SCP-611 instances were found tapping against the glass of the observation room that looks into the enclosure. Unfortunately, though, one of the parasitic toothpicks was able to make it to on-site Brick Room 13. There, it was able to find a supply of toothpicks to camouflage itself amongst, and was then picked up and used by an unsuspecting member of personnel shortly afterwards. This led to several eggs being implanted in the staff member's mouth, resulting in larvae burrowing into their jaw and eventually bursting out from beneath their skin. The new population of SCP-611 instances created by this infestation resulted in a redacted number of deaths and an even higher rate of severe mandible trauma. Several staff required urgent medical treatment for extreme facial fractures caused by the sudden exit of multiple matured SCP-611 flies. Those who survived their injuries would return to work at the Foundation, some still with the use of their jaws. Following Incident 611-1, the Foundation saw it prevalent to move the SCP-611 enclosure to a lower level of the facility the specimens were kept at. This placed them further away from any mess halls and break rooms, where they could potentially hide among toothpicks, ready to start another new infestation. As an additional measure to avoid any future accidental SCP-611 exposure to staff, no food products are permitted on the same level as the new location of the enclosure. Any personnel who suspect a possible containment breach, or they might have contracted any SCP-611 larvae, are to report to a Foundation-assigned dental examiner for an oral hygiene check and anti-parasitic treatment when needed. After cleaning up the last of the blood, the priest splashes water on his face, hoping the chill will help steady him, steel his nerves ahead of the ceremony. He's performed dozens, hundreds even, knows the order of service for a Catholic wedding by heart. That was until it had found him. The Faith Eater, he calls it. When it first appears, or rather, its voice does, the priest falls for its trick. He thinks it's the voice of God speaking, reaching down from the heavens to offer up divine wisdom. But the more strange things the voice tells the priest to do, the more he begins to wonder. Then it starts telling him about the weddings, what to do, who to accept, how many it needs, and where to expect the Harbinger. It looks almost satanic the first time, the sights and sounds of what could only be an unholy ritual. But wrestling with it afterwards, the priest believes the lies told by the Faith Eater, that this is all part of the grand plan. The Harbinger is only present at these services to help determine who is worthy and who isn't. For a time, the priest resigns himself to his own lack of understanding. The Lord's ways are not his to know, his methods beyond the comprehension of a mortal. But he still has nightmares about all the blood. Lifting his head and looking at himself in the mirror, the priest clenches a fist, trying to stop the trembling of his fingers. The voice of the Faith Eater is still in his head, telling him that its Harbinger has arrived. A door opens behind him, and the priest sees the figure in the mirror behind him. They always look the same, always appearing as a man of middle age. But beneath the surface, it has no organs, its body made of the same fibrous tissue as an insect, hair and teeth formed from chitin. This is more cicada than man, just like the Faith Eater itself. It's always nerve-wracking, performing the ceremony knowing there's one present who doesn't belong. The priest always expects there to be a perceptive child or someone, anyone, on the bride or groom's side to point out there's a stranger standing among the groomsmen, that the Harbinger will be noticed and the subterfuge will be gone. But it never happens. They're always happy to see Cousin Johnny, as they call it, and laugh at its jokes. They seem to be able to understand the jumble of words that the priest can hear it speaking in. The priest feels his heart racing as he gets through the order of proceedings, drumming at his ribs knowing the time to exchange vows is getting closer and closer. The happy couple recite their beautiful words and give each other their rings, and a swell hits the pit of the priest's stomach. The Harbinger, Cousin Johnny as they know him, steps forward with multiple pairs of pliers in his hands, just like the previous time. He passes them around the other groomsmen he'd been hiding amongst, and the bridesmaids, compelling them to start wrenching their teeth out one by one. There are no screams, no signs of pain, just copious amounts of blood pouring from the wounds in their mouth. As the Harbinger gathers up the removed bloody teeth and presents them to the bride and groom, the newlyweds start eating. The crack of their own enamel, jawbones breaking, is sickening, every time causing the priest to avert his eyes and look upwards. Sometimes he prays to the real God, not the Faith Eater, that this nightmare will cease. Other times, he just stares at the church's rafters. This time, he spots something secluded among the old woodwork overhead, the only other witness to the objectionable ceremony below, a nest of cicadas. Of all the areas of public life that the SCP Foundation keeps under surveillance, one might not expect the world of dentistry to be the one that warrants so much observation. Yet, over the years, if the Foundation's mission has come to prove anything, it's that anomalies can and will occur almost anywhere, in the most likely or unlikely of places, including inside human teeth. Some Foundation agents have spent tireless years, even entire careers, embedded as assistants, receptionists, and other members of staff at dental practitioners, on the lookout for SCP incursions. While under deep cover at these establishments, agents are tasked with keeping a close eye on the medical and dental records of patients, and are instructed to report any potentially anomalous conditions to the Foundation. One recent incident took place at a rural dentist's office in New Mexico. The patient, an unassuming average male, had booked an appointment with a local dental surgery, complaining of a mild pain within his jaw, in and around his canines. The dentist, a man named locally as Uncle Ted, given his reputation as a friendly family dentist, performed a routine examination on the patient, expecting that the man had little more than a minor toothache. On first glance, Uncle Ted thought he was looking at an ectopic growth, wherein a tooth grows in an abnormal position, usually stemming from the root. Shifting his tiny mirror around, he wasn't certain. It could have been a gemination, where a developing tooth splits into two teeth, but the patient had said this pain had only started up relatively recently. On top of that, his teeth were all fully developed. Either one of these conditions would have been noticed much sooner. What he saw when he looked in the patient's mouth was something entirely different. In his uncertainty, the dentist probed at the afflicted tooth with one of his implements and, to his horror, saw something was burrowing inside the tooth. Unbeknownst to him, both the patient and his assisting dental nurse had been undercover operatives of the SCP Foundation and had been waiting for exactly this moment. Now able to get visual confirmation of the anomaly, the assistant locked the dentist and patient inside the office and called in the incident. Within a matter of moments, operatives of the Foundation's Mobile Task Force Lambda-12, also known by the codename Pest Control, had arrived on the scene to detain the patient and bringing Uncle Ted the dentist into custody as a witness to be dosed with amnestics. What he had just witnessed was a cicada crawling into the man's tooth. The SCP Foundation has given this designation to a phenomenon that affects members of the superfamily Cicadidae, or more colloquially known as cicadas. What do insects like these have to do with teeth? Well, instances of SCP-5852 are cicadas afflicted with an anomalous growth of human teeth. The development of SCP-5852 has, at present, never been recorded occurring with the teeth of any other species, only human. In addition, researchers at the SCP Foundation have extensively examined each known case of cicadas being afflicted with SCP-5852 growths. As far as anyone is aware, there is nothing linking any of these cases of SCP-5852 infestations. Each recorded specimen afflicted with them have nothing in common, from genetic background to the region the insects inhabit. All SCP Foundation researchers looking into the phenomenon of SCP-5852 seem to concur that these teeth can manifest at random inside any cicadas on the planet. As a result, physical containment of potential specimens is impossible, given the sheer numbers of cicada populations in the wild, all of them considered to be potential specimens. Those known to be afflicted with SCP-5852 instances are referred to under the designation of SCP-5852-1. A cicada becomes one of these when a growth begins, typically occurring when the insect makes direct external contact with an SCP-5852 instance or another infected SCP-5852-1. However, in some cases, researchers have observed a selection of instances wherein infectees suffer an internal onset growth of SCP-5852, seemingly having had no other contact with the anomalous insects. Essentially, they can grow on or in any affected specimen. Once a cicada has been infected, the SCP-5852 growth will begin by manifesting within its body. This can cause anything from mild pain to intense discomfort to the cicada, which only worsens as the growth gets larger. When this occurs, anomalous teeth sprout from it, and these can pierce through an SCP-5852-1 infectee's soft tissues surrounding the developing tooth. As the teeth increase in number, continuing to grow and damage these tissues, it can lead to fatal injuries within the affected cicada, especially if the teeth emerge within and cause damage to the insect's nervous system or cardiovascular system. During experimentation, Foundation research teams have discovered that intervening while these SCP-5852 growths are occurring has proved impossible. One test involved making numerous attempts to counteract the rapid growth of more teeth using targeted injections of acid. Researchers theorized that because human enamel is mostly comprised of a crystallized mineral called hydroxyapatite, that a sufficient application of acid would trigger demineralization, essentially dissolving the teeth growing on SCP-5852-1 instances like salt crystals in water. However, given that acid with a pH lower than 5.5 was required in order to demineralize enamel, this also meant that the infected cicadas were dissolved. Further experimentation with lower measures of acid also resulted in failure. Inevitably, a cicada that has become an instance of SCP-5852-1 will continue to anomalously grow teeth out of its body until they break through the insect's exoskeleton. Once this has happened, It will become entirely overwhelmed by teeth, but will attempt a desperate effort for survival. As is well known among those who live in areas where cicadas emerge en masse after their long period spent dormant, these insects are infamous for shedding their exoskeletons in a process similar to molting, in a process commonly referred to as sloughing. SCP-5852 infected cicadas will attempt the same when overwhelmed by teeth growths. Foundation entomology experts have since gathered up some of these sloughed exoskeletons and have run numerous tests on them. Conducting close analysis, the Foundation has determined that these exoskeletons are comprised entirely of hydroxyapatite. That's the aforementioned naturally occurring calcium mineral found in tooth enamel. When an instance of SCP-5852-1 sheds its calcified exoskeleton, this signals the termination of the insect's life. In every documented case, the process always results in the death of an infected cicada specimen. This occurs when the teeth that have grown on their old exoskeletons pierce and rupture the softer, underdeveloped exoskeleton the cicada grows to try and replace it. These are far more fragile, and damaging it is enough to kill an SCP-5852 infected cicada, if it hasn't already been killed by having its body ruptured by the teeth growths. Foundation research teams have closely examined the conditions of the teeth that grow as the result of an SCP-5852 infection, and have concluded that over 30% are discolored. Just under 30% possess some form of cavity, and there have, at a lower rate, been instances where an SCP-5852 has manifested as malformed teeth. Some of these have been observed as containing teratomas, a rare form of germ cell that can create tumors in fully formed tissues, including within teeth. Smaller percentages of the teeth that develop in SCP-5852-1 instances are either macrodontia or microdontia, teeth that are either larger or smaller than the average size. Meanwhile, as few others have grown as germinated teeth, wherein one of the developing growths splits into two teeth, or ectopic growths that causes them to form in abnormal positions or grow at an angle. Although some Foundation researchers have pointed out that a tooth growing out of a cicada could easily be considered an abnormal place for teeth to develop. Arguably strangest of all, however, is the 1.45% of SCP-5852 teeth that grow out of infected cicadas in the exact same condition as teeth that have undergone some form of dental restoration or cosmetic repair work. How is this able to occur without the aid of a trained dental professional is still unclear, and a question that has baffled Foundation researchers. The widespread nature of SCP-5852 has made it hard, if not entirely impossible, for the Foundation to contain it. The Foundation themselves have not been exempt from directly experiencing outbreaks of SCP-5852. An incident arose on the 21st of July 2012, significant for marking the first recorded instance of SCP-5852, which normally only affects cicadas, affecting humans. On the day in question, senior Foundation researcher at Site-21 and leader of the team handling the experimentation with SCP-5852-1 specimens, Dr. Charles Greaves, would request a medical examination with an on-site physician. He complained that he'd been suffering with a mild toothache that seemed to be affecting his canines, and the severity of it had gotten so bad that it was affecting his ability to focus and function during work at the Foundation. Shortly after, his request for an examination was approved, and he was submitted to the Site-21 medical office for treatment. The Foundation doctor, in an effort to remove Dr. Greaves' toothache, saw fit to entirely remove the affected teeth. This took little more than conducting a routine extraction and pulling the researcher's canines out, but afterwards, to the horror of both Greaves and the man now looking at his removed tooth, there was something living inside it. Several juvenile, developing instances of Magicicada cassinii, referred to colloquially and among entomologists as the 17-year cicada or dwarf periodical cicada, had somehow burrowed their way into Dr. Greaves' teeth. The entirety of Site-21 was placed on an immediate lockdown as the Foundation struggled to ascertain exactly how these cicadas had gotten into someone's teeth. In order to gauge just how widespread the anomalous incident was, every member of staff was requested to submit to a mandatory tooth examination. Over the course of several hours, it was subsequently discovered that every member of Site-21 personnel who had been assigned to researching SCP-5852 had numerous specimens of cicadas burrowing in their teeth. Checking personnel work logs, there appeared to be a breach and one that risked further potential spread of this infection. A Foundation security guard had been given several days of unpaid leave due to similar symptoms to Dr. Greaves, having reported his toothache a few days prior to the senior researcher. Unlike Greaves, however, the guard was not granted an on-site examination and was forced to instead consult a local dentist and wasn't permitted to return to work until his toothache was resolved. Said civilian dentist, one Theodore Uncle Ted Robinson, would subsequently witness a cicada burrowing into the guard's tooth during the procedure. Fortunately, another Foundation operative was also present during the guard's checkup, and this agent, posing as a dental assistant, was able to contact the Foundation for support. Presently, the offending security guard has been made redundant and received severance without pay. Meanwhile, in his absence, Mr. Robinson's small practice was forced to shutter its doors permanently. Amnestic treatment was administered to the now former dentist. However, an adverse reaction led to exacerbated memory loss prior to Mr. Robinson's release from Foundation custody. The Foundation considers its efforts to contain the SCP-5852-related outbreak a marked success thanks to minimal civilian witnesses and no casualties. The live cicada specimens that were extracted from affected personnel were kept and studied closely. Each one would begin to develop SCP-5852 tooth growth soon after. When analyzing these instances of SCP-5852-1, research teams discovered that the teeth being grown by these cicadas were exact, identical matches to their own teeth. The teeth of the previous hosts were now growing out of the infected insects, though how exactly this occurred, or even how the cicadas were able to burrow into staff members' teeth at all, remains unclear. Following this incident, personnel were instructed to never directly handle instances of SCP-5852-1 and make no skin-to-skin contact with any of the cicadas, regardless of whether they were alive or dead. It remains a mystery to SCP Foundation researchers exactly what is responsible for causing SCP-5852 outbreaks among cicada populations. Nothing has been gleaned about the precise origin of the phenomenon, despite extensive experimentation and examination of infected SCP-5852-1 instances. Given that the tooth-growing phenomena can occur at random among cicada populations, and the fact that this makes containing SCP-5852 somewhat troublesome, the Foundation has been forced to come up with alternate procedures in order to keep public awareness of SCP-5852 as minimal as possible. A cover story was devised and disseminated to civilians through the use of local and nationwide media. Stories began cropping up, especially in areas known for having sizable populations of cicadas, of a condition affecting the insects. This was referred to as tumorous growth disease, providing a plausible explanation for the toothy growths affecting the cicada populations. Later, this cover story was further pushed by Foundation-aligned entomological experts, further promoting the notion that cicadas afflicted with tumorous growth disease could spread a form of mange, a skin disease normally caused by mites and seen in dogs, but that can also result in rashes and irritation in humans, as well as the risk of secondary infections. The result of these cover stories to explain the presence of tooth-riddled cicadas to the public has, for the most part, had the intended effect of prompting civilians to avoid cicadas when they are no longer dormant. This has also led to most civilians avoiding making any contact with the corpses or discarded exoskeletons of the insects out of concerns around the fictitious cicada mange. No further incidents of cicadas burrowing into teeth, like the one that occurred at Site-21, have been noted. Given their propensity for tracking, containing, and, when necessary, exterminating anomalous organisms such as insects and vermin, Mobile Task Force Lambda-12 have been assigned as the first response team when dealing with SCP-5852 outbreaks. Should any infected cicadas be reported or found in the wild, then Pest Control are sent to secure them and return them to the Entomology Department of Site-21. So far, very few at the Foundation have questioned why SCP-5852 specifically affects insects of the superfamily Cicadidae, and no other entomological group, or why certain other anomalies also seem to revolve around cicadas. One member of personnel, Research Assistant Wolfie Dalebro, did, however, raise this question in a small online forum connected with the Gamers Against Weed, an online collective known to create anomalies for their own amusement. In his post, Wolfie highlighted that there seemed to be some tangential link between SCP-5852 and SCP-2852, a figure known colloquially as Cousin Johnny. SCP-2852 has been known to appear at various Catholic and Anglican religious functions, more specifically at baptisms, weddings, and funerals. An appearance of SCP-2852 often results in ceremonies taking a disturbing and violent turn, which also all seem to be connected to cicadas in some way. Weddings affected by SCP-2852 are referred to by the Foundation as white level events, and Wolfie Dalebro had discovered that one of these took place in the same location that SCP-5852 was first discovered. Templeton Memorial Church, located in Templeton, West Virginia, had been the site of a white level event several years prior to the discovery being made. A nest of cicadas infected with the anomalous growths, the first recorded instances of SCP-5852-1, were found nesting in the roof of Templeton Memorial Church by Foundation agents clearing up evidence of the disastrous wedding that had been visited by Cousin Johnny. It is unclear if this insect nest was present during the White Level event, and if SCP-5852 was somehow the result of SCP-2852's presence. Since postulating about a connection between SCP-5852 and SCP-2852, Research Assistant Wolfie Dalebro has since been removed from his position at the Foundation. In 2021, he was discovered to have been engaging with the forum connected with the Gamers Against Weed group, and was administered with amnestics following his subsequent termination. It is still unclear if this research assistant was able to learn the connection between SCP-5852 and Imago. You open your eyes, only to find something blocking your vision. Are those teeth? Human teeth? Growing out of your eyes? Oh no. Oh God, no. Taking the subway can be a real hit or miss experience. On one hand, it's cheaper than driving, especially with gas prices these days. It's convenient, eco-friendly, and removes any potential stress about where to park. But it can also be hot, poorly maintained, and worst of all, it's filled with the public. These are the thoughts running through the woman's head as she stands on the subway on the way home from work. She holds onto a nearby pole for balance, struggling to maintain a bubble of personal space as a steady stream of new passengers climb on at each stop. She can feel her chest tightening with anxiety, and she takes a deep breath to loosen the stress. Just a couple more stops to go, and then she can get out of here and retreat to the comfort of her apartment. The train car slows down, and the doors open for the penultimate stop. Great! After this one, she'll be home free. Of course, more people climb on. Everybody has places to go, she reminds herself. It's fine. But as one pale, jumpy-looking man crowds a little bit too close to the pole she's holding, she feels her anxiety levels spike again. Why won't he just respect her personal space? Come on, buddy. It's a crowded train, but there's enough room to take a step back. She's working up the nerve to say something when the train jerks suddenly, starting back up. The sharp motion sends the man rocking forward, and he bumps into her, hard. She feels a sudden sharp pain in her hand, and looks down to see a speck of blood. Seriously? She swears at the strange man, unable to help herself. He glances down, and his eyes widen. He apologizes profusely and backs away from her, unmistakable terror in his eyes. A bit of an overreaction, she thinks. She just yelled a bit. It isn't as if she was going to hurt him. But he pushes through the crowd, moving away from her, and she doesn't care to follow. The train slows, and the doors slide open again. Thank goodness, her stop. She shoves her way out of the train car as fast as she can, and doesn't slow down until she's unlocking the door to her apartment. Time to tend to the weirdest injury she's ever gotten. She disinfects the wound on her hand and begins to apply a bandage. Now that she's slowed down, she can get a better look at it. She had assumed the guy's keys had poked her or something, but now, examining it more carefully, it looks kind of like a bite? Did he have some kind of animal up his sleeve or something? It all happened so fast she couldn't really tell. Better to be safe than sorry. She'll go get a rabies vaccine tomorrow. With that plan in place and a bandage applied to her hand, she quickly forgets about the hellish subway ride, the nervous man, and the strange bite. The next day, she gets her rabies shot and puts the whole bizarre encounter out of her mind for good. And it stays there, out of sight and out of mind. Until about a week later, when her gums begin to ache. It starts with a twinge, a bit of discomfort one morning that wakes her up before her alarm. But as the day goes on, the ache grows more and more difficult to ignore. She finds herself chewing on her pen during meetings, alleviating the itching, painful feeling in her gums with the pressure of it. A few days later, it's all she can think about. She half considers picking up one of those hard plastic rings for teething babies. At that point, she realizes it's time to go to the dentist. They'll know what to do. But when the dentist leans her back in that adjustable chair and peers into her mouth, he is just as clueless as she is, perhaps even more so. She's presenting symptoms of a condition known as hyperdontia, he explains. She is, at the age of 30 years old, growing new teeth. Not wisdom teeth that are coming in, but a whole new row of teeth just behind the ones she already has. He advises her to come back in once the teeth have grown in all the way, and they can discuss next steps then. She calls in sick to work the next day. She lies and tells them it's the flu. How could she explain the truth? But at least there's a solution in sight. The dentist will help her figure out what to do next. And surely this will be the worst of it, right? Unfortunately, she couldn't be more wrong. When she wakes up the next day, she notices some difficulty breathing through her nose, accompanied by a feeling of discomfort in her nostrils. Oh great, is she actually sick now? She goes to blow her nose, but nothing comes out. She rubs at her nostrils and is startled by a sudden sharp pain and the sensation of something solid in there. What the hell is going on? She rushes to the bathroom mirror, tilting her head back to get a better look. When she can make out what is blocking her nostrils, her jaw drops. Teeth. They're smaller than the ones in her mouth and somewhat obscured, but there's no doubt about it. Little rows of teeth have erupted inside of her nose. She calls her dentist and schedules an immediate appointment. She struggles to explain on the phone, but no matter what words she chooses, she knows the doctor won't truly understand until he sees her condition with his own eyes. And when he does see it, he can't stop himself from crying out in shock. This is no ordinary case of hyperdontia. This is something else entirely, something that should be medically impossible. Seeing the appearance of teeth inside of the woman's nose, the dentist decides to perform a thorough examination of the rest of her face and head. Much to his and her horror, he finds small teeth beginning to erupt in her ear canals too. He warns that if they are not removed, they could cause permanent damage to her hearing. There's no doubt about it. For the sake of her well-being, the dentist must perform the strangest extractions of his career. The woman is given an anesthetic, and he gets to work. By the time he is finished, the dentist has pulled 36 teeth of varying sizes and shapes from her mouth, nose, and ears. It was a harrowing affair, but at least it's over. He prescribes pain medication, an antibiotic, and some time off of work, and advises the woman to give him a call if she experiences anything like this again. Neither of them will say it aloud, but they're both privately terrified that she'll have to come back in and do it all over again. For the next few weeks, the woman feels like she's back to normal. She's a bit shaken up by the experience, a bit exhausted, but otherwise it all seems to be resolved. Then the aches start up again, not just in her gums this time, but in her ears, in her nose, and more terrifying of all, in new places too. She can feel them, the germs of new teeth growing under the surface in between her fingers and her toes, even in her eyelids. The feeling was unpleasant and distracting before, but now it is absolute agony. She can barely dial the telephone to contact her dentist, but she manages to call him and drag herself down to the office. At first, he doesn't want to believe it, but then he performs an X-ray. The images that come back turn his stomach, and he nearly vomits onto the floor. He can see them clear as day. Teeth, 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 growing everywhere. The woman feels that unique ache, the building pressure of something struggling to grow, ready to burst through the skin and be born. More teeth in her mouth and teeth in her eyes, her ears, all over her body. Even if he extracts every tooth again, even if he plucks out each new growth, there will be more waiting to replace them. Unsure of what else to recommend, he advises the woman to check herself into the hospital. Whatever her affliction is, it has progressed beyond his capabilities. Weeks later, the woman is lying in her hospital bed, weak, exhausted, barely able to move. Her skin is dotted with teeth. Her doctors tried to perform surgery to remove some of the teeth before they could erupt, but the incisions became tiny mouths filled with even more teeth. Now, they've all but given up. She can barely open her eyes to get a look at the strange figures that enter her hospital room, promising to help get to the bottom of her condition. They're scientists, they say, and they specialize in unusual conditions like hers. This poor, unfortunate woman is considered the first recorded patient to be infected with SCP-2450. SCP-2450 is an infectious disease, the most notable symptom of which is the manifestation of severe hyperdontia in unusual parts of the body. The initial source of the infection has been traced to the location now known as Building 2450, a former men's bathroom and a company service station off of a major motorway in the United Kingdom. It is unknown exactly how the infection is transmitted, but Level 5 HAZ suits have been ineffective at containing and preventing the infection. The disease can affect a wide variety of mammalian species, including but not limited to rodents, dogs, and humans. Approximately 23% of mammals exposed to the initial infection source area will contract SCP-2450. Infection can also be passed through a bite, provided the bite is deep enough to draw blood. Infections from bites occur at a rate of approximately 12%. The initial stage of infection is characterized by the presentation of hyperdontia in various orifices of the body. I am sorry to say that is exactly what it sounds like, the eruption of extra teeth in places where no teeth should be. This generally begins in the mouth, as extra teeth sprout from the gums, the roof of the mouth, and the frenulum beneath the tongue. However, as the disease progresses, any bodily opening can become fair game, including the nostrils, the eye sockets, and other, even less comfortable locations. The size of the teeth varies depending on the size of the opening and tends to be proportional to the space available. Teeth produced as a result of SCP-2450 infection grow at a rate approximately 12 times that of ordinary teeth and can grow from gem to full root completion over the course of a period between 3 weeks and 9 months, depending on size. As the infection progresses, more and more rows of teeth will grow further and further back into the affected orifice. Once all natural bodily orifices have grown at least one full row of teeth, the infection will progress into its next stage. At this stage, parts of the body that form a semi-closed space, such as the spaces between the toes or the armpits, will begin to erupt teeth. If that wasn't horrible enough, any apertures formed on the body via external trauma, such as cuts on the skin, will become growth sites for SCP-2450 teeth. Did you just feel a shiver run down your spine? Me too. My own spine, not your spine, you understand. Back to the matter at hand, which I'm so sorry to tell you does in fact get worse. You see, as the infection progresses and more teeth are growing, the calcium and other minerals required to grow these teeth have to come from somewhere. These minerals will be leached from the body's natural stores, and the process can frequently result in osteoporosis and hypocalcemia. Administering calcium and other mineral supplements to SCP-2450 patients will keep them alive, and they will continue to produce teeth indefinitely if this is the case. You might be wondering if the process of growing all of these teeth is especially painful. Allow me to provide absolutely no reassurance. It is. It has been described as extremely painful and similar to the teething pains experienced by young children as their regular teeth develop and grow in. Much like teething infants, patients will experience a strong desire to address this pain by biting or grinding the affected teeth. However, as the infection progresses, the teeth will begin to erupt in areas that are incapable of biting. In these cases, patients will often grind the teeth against solid objects such as the corners of walls. This activity has been highly discouraged, as it could result in cuts and lacerations that may provide a breeding ground for even more teeth, resulting in a truly vicious cycle. Incidentally, this behavior led to the first recorded instance of SCP-2450 infection via tooth-to-blood contact. SCP-2450 was first discovered by the Foundation during a routine search of medical literature, and on February 19, 2009, the Foundation classified it as an anomalous phenomenon sufficiently distinct from hyperdontia. At that point, standard information suppression policy was applied successfully, and the pattern of outbreaks was then used to trace the source to the aforementioned service station. At that point, a series of quarantines and experimentation revealed that the men's restroom in Wing B was the specific point of origin. As far as the Foundation has been able to determine, there is nothing anomalous about the service station or that particular bathroom, aside from the SCP-2450 infections themselves. The station was first built in 1983 and operated normally for decades. So when and how did everything change? By interviewing cleaning and security staff and reviewing years of security footage, the SCP Foundation was able to tentatively pinpoint the date of origin for SCP-2450 to July 15, 2008. On that day, the following events were captured by security cameras located in the building. First, 3 men in black hooded sweatshirts entered the building, their hoods pulled up to obscure their faces. One of the men carried a large, seemingly empty backpack. Another held an unidentified green implement. The third man had nothing in his hands. Shortly after entering the building, the men stopped outside of the Wing B men's bathroom and spoke amongst themselves. No audio was recorded, and their lips could not be seen, so there is no way of knowing exactly what was said. But whatever it was, the men entered the bathroom a few moments later. Before shutting the door behind them, the last man examined the area, looking to see if they were being followed. Seeing that they were alone, he closed the door, and the three of them disappeared. They were inside the bathroom for the next 2.5 hours. Whatever happened in that bathroom is still unknown, as security cameras inside of restrooms are generally frowned upon and tend not to be installed. After those 2.5 hours were up, 2 out of the 3 men exited the bathroom, the man with the backpack and the man who was carrying the green object. The third man was not with them. The backpack now appeared to be full, and a great deal heavier than it was on the way in. The 2 men walked to the main entrance of the building, at which point the one without the backpack stopped and reached into the top pocket of his hooded sweatshirt. He then patted the pockets of his trousers. Whatever he was looking for was not there. He turned to head back into the building, but the other man placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. The 2 argued for a moment before leaving the building and getting into a car. Later analysis of the license plate revealed it to be a stolen vehicle. They drove off toward the south and out of sight. Subsequent attempts to track the men down have so far been unsuccessful. The cleaner on duty that day later reported that one of the bathroom stalls was locked for an unusually long time. When he came back and was able to enter and clean the stall, he spotted a large amount of what appeared to be white gravel on the floor and the lid of the toilet. This is now believed to be dental matter. Speaking of unidentified objects, the green implement from the security tapes was later discovered and identified. It is now referred to as SCP-2450-1 and is stored in Reliquary 87B-6, Locker 12004. SCP-2450-1 is a green plastic toothbrush of unknown make or manufacturer. As you might have guessed, it is no ordinary toothbrush. When a tooth is brushed with SCP-2450-1, the teeth will be worn down to the root at a rapid pace. An entire molar, including the root, can be removed with the brush in 5 minutes. In spite of this, it appears to do no damage to any other surrounding tissue such as the skin or gums. On the back of the handle, the text, "For non-oral use only," is printed. The origins of this toothbrush and the motivations for the men that entered the bathroom stall that day are still unknown. However, given the information that we do have, I feel I can make an educated guess. It is my personal theory that the third man, the one who had never been found, was suffering from an advanced form of the SCP-2450 infection. When the men attempted to treat his condition with the anomalous toothbrush, he had advanced to such a severe state that his body was primarily made up of teeth, and he crumbled apart during the process. His remains were then stuffed into the backpack and taken out of the building. The debris left behind somehow infected the area, leading to the subsequent SCP-2450 infections that have occurred in the area since. I have no way to officially confirm this speculation, of course, but it seems as reasonable of a theory as something can be where anomalous tooth-based diseases and unusually powerful toothbrushes are concerned. Any patients afflicted with SCP-2450 must be kept in Secure War Land 12 and physically restrained in order to contain the infection and prevent any further spread. The initial source of infection is contained at the site of its discovery in Building 2450, which has been disguised as an electrical substation. Building 2450 is kept securely locked and surrounded by a standard substation fence, which has been covered with danger of death warning signs in order to deter any civilians from approaching. The building is kept under constant surveillance, and anyone attempting to enter the premises must be detained and thoroughly questioned. The only method of entering Building 2450 is a double-door system, including an isolation chamber which prevents any small mammals from entering the building. No mammals, with the exception of approved test subjects, may exit the building. One member of Foundation personnel with formal dentistry training must be assigned to monitor all dentistry journals and affiliated news sources for cases that might indicate an outbreak of SCP-2450. If one is detected, swift and decisive action must be taken. There is currently no known cure for SCP-2450. Patients who have been infected with the disease can either be kept alive with mineral supplements and produce teeth indefinitely, or they can slowly lose calcium and vital minerals over time until their body can no longer function. Either way, they will be a prisoner of the teeth until the day that they die, confined to a terrifying, toothy existence. Though those who have already been infected are somewhat doomed, at least until a cure can be found, we can take some comfort in the knowledge that SCP-2450 can be easily avoided. Just stay away from the men's restroom in Building 2450 and try not to let anyone bite you, at least not hard enough to draw blood. Still, the images I saw while looking into SCP-2450 will haunt me for quite some time. In fact, I think I've had my fill of the topic. My gums are beginning to itch, so if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go eat some caramels and forget to floss. Can't let the teeth get too comfortable. In blissful sleep, blood begins to leak out of the woman's mouth. Her teeth, they're moving, slithering out of the holes in her gums. Is something pulling them out, or are they just breaking free? It was supposed to be a sunny Saturday afternoon, warm and mild, without so much as a cloud in the sky. Instead, a storm rolled in, turning the sky gray and thick with dark clouds that drenched the town in a torrent of rain. So the young woman had to scrap her beach plans, and now she's driving through the rain, looking for a way to salvage her day out. What's a good indoor activity? She could go to the library, pick out a book to read, but she could do that any day. This was supposed to be a special day, a little treat after a particularly stressful week at work. As if to answer her silent plea for a rainy day activity, she spots the marquee on the neighborhood movie theater, a special screening of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Not only is catching a movie the perfect way to wait out the rain, they just so happen to be screening one of her childhood favorites. A warm rush of nostalgia washes over her, and she pulls into the parking lot. The screening starts at 2 o'clock, and right now it's 1:50. Perfect. Things are definitely looking up. She parks her car and pushes open the door to the theater. When she crosses the threshold, she's transported from the dreary, rainy day outside to a paradise of sweet treats. The theater went all out with their decorations for the special screening, and it really shows. Massive rainbow lollipops brush the ceiling. There's a balloon arch made to look like it's made of gobstoppers, and they've put up a chocolate fountain next to the popcorn machine. Of course they would have chocolate. What kind of Willy Wonka event leaves out the chocolate? The woman steps up to the counter, where a cheerful worker dressed as an Oompa Loompa greets her. She's already here. Why not treat herself a little bit? She purchases a ticket, along with some popcorn, some jelly beans, a large lemonade, and a big bar of chocolate. The day is really starting to turn around. The movie is just as delightful as she remembered, a mix of whimsy and dark comedy, and the accompanying treats make it even better. As she picks a bit of jelly bean out of her teeth, she feels a slight twinge, a dull ache. Better remember to floss later. She really doesn't need a cavity right now. After the movie concludes, she tosses the remains of her cinematic feast into the garbage and heads home. The rain has stopped, and the sun is peeking out from between the clouds again. It was a lovely afternoon at the movies, the perfect way to save the day from being ruined by the storm. The woman doesn't think about it much more than that for the rest of the weekend, but when she wakes up on Monday morning, something feels off. The toothache she felt a twinge of at the movie theater has gotten worse. By the middle of the week, at least 6 of her teeth are throbbing constantly. Pain medication helps reduce the pain a bit, but the feeling of pressure inside the teeth persists and is distractingly uncomfortable. She calls her dentist to make an appointment, but they can't see her until next week. For now, she'll just have to deal with it, no matter how terrible it feels. The rest of the week passes in a blur of dental distress, and on Friday night, as she brushes her aching teeth, the woman notices something troubling. One of her front canines looks cracked. How did she break it? She hasn't eaten anything hard this week. She's been treating her teeth with the utmost care. But a closer inspection reveals that, indeed, the enamel is cracked. It doesn't look like she broke the tooth from the outside, but like something is pushing out from the inside. She shudders and reminds herself that the dentist will be able to take care of it on Monday. She just has to make it through the weekend, and everything will be fine. At some point during the process of ruminating on the troubles with her teeth, she falls into a restless sleep. The next morning, she wakes up in a state of surprising relief. The pain is gone. She sits up in bed, stretches, and yawns. She catches a glimpse of herself in the mirror across from her bed as she does, and freezes in place. The reason she can't feel her tooth pain anymore is because her teeth are gone. Not all of them, but 6 teeth, the teeth that were aching all week, have vanished. Did they fall out in her sleep? She strips the sheets off her bed, shaking them out, searching for any sign of the missing teeth. Nothing. She feels like she's losing her mind. Teeth can't just up and vanish like that. But where could they have gone? Did she swallow them? Her mind races as she struggles to explain the unexplainable. Wait a minute. She can find out exactly what happened the previous night. She has a security camera installed in her room. She'd almost forgotten about the camera, which had been installed a year prior when an old roommate kept borrowing her clothes without asking. She never bothered to get rid of it. With a rush of gratitude for her past self, she pulls up the app on her phone that logs the footage and selects the folder for the previous night. She scans through the footage, seeing several hours of her sleeping body tossing and turning in bed. Then, in the video, her mouth opens. She watches carefully, her eyes widening, as she struggles to process what comes next. On her phone screen, clear as can be, she can see teeth climbing out of her mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, crawling across her face, down her neck, across the bedspread, and onto her bedside table. That would have been enough to leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about the world, but the video keeps playing. The teeth scuttle around her bedside table, then onto her desk, collecting paper clips, a hair tie, some brightly colored post-it notes, a safety pin, a scrap of string, and a barrette. With their chosen items in tow, the teeth crawl down off of the desk, over the carpet, and out of her bedroom door. How are they getting around? They're walking on what look like little tendrils, but she can't figure out where they came from. Little tendrils poking through the cracks in the teeth? She shudders at the thought. While she slept, her teeth came to life and made a break for it? Where did they go from there? Could they still be in her apartment? She shakily opens the door to her room and peeks out. She half expects to see the teeth still in the hallway, but when she checks, there's nothing there. She combs every inch of her apartment next. She isn't sure what she'll do if she finds the teeth, the creatures they've become. Maybe try to capture them and take them to the dentist? But it doesn't matter. Her search is useless. They're long gone. The only evidence they were ever even there is a light speckle of blood on her pillowcase, the sheet, and across the carpet. It's such a small amount, she'd never even know it was there if she weren't looking for it. But now what? She's sitting here with 6 missing teeth, no idea where they went, and no clue what to do next. How could she begin to explain any of this to anyone? She can't, she realizes. So, after taking a moment to weigh her options, she deletes the security footage and leaves a voicemail for her dentist, telling them it's an emergency. She lost some teeth in an accident, she tells them. As for the truth, nobody ever needs to know. She wouldn't even know where to start if she decided to try and tell anyone what happened. Better to just put it out of her mind, get her teeth fixed, and try to move on. Later that night, back at the movie theater, the Oompa Loompa from the concession stand is tidying up in the hours after her shift. The limited run of Willy Wonka special screenings is over, and it's time to put all of the Candy Factory decor back in its respective boxes and switch off the chocolate fountain. She breaks down the giant prop lollipops, deflates the jelly bean balloons, and cleans up the chocolate that spilled onto the counter. Might as well sneak a bit of candy for herself in the process, and use the sugar rush to make the work go faster. It helps a bit, but there's still a lot to do for one employee at this understaffed theater. By the time she's finished, it's dark outside. Time to pack up her things, scrub off that orange face paint, and head home. As she walks through the back door, a shiver runs down her spine. What's that sound? It sounds like scratching and scrabbling inside the wall behind her. She turns, looking for an animal hiding there, but she can't see anything. Maybe it's a mouse? But just as she's about to turn around and head to her car, she sees a flash of light glinting off of something shiny. Metal? All the while, the noise continues, that strange scratching and scrabbling. What the hell is going on over there? There's some sort of unknown thing in the walls of the theater, or between the walls of the 2 buildings at least. Her curiosity gets the better of her, and she finds herself giving into it. Whatever's in there, she needs to see what it could possibly be. She tiptoes over to the crevice between the theater and the building next door to it and peers into the darkness. She can't quite make out what she sees in there, but there's some kind of shape, like a little box. and she can see movement within the shadows there. What is that? She pulls out her phone and is just about to activate the flashlight function when suddenly the crevice lights up in the glow of tiny spotlights? No, miniature flashlights like the kind you put on a keychain. They're lined up in a row and all switched on at once to illuminate the structure in front of them. Now she can see what it is, but getting a good look at it doesn't make her any less confused. If anything, it's only more baffling than it was before. The structure is visible now, a twisting mass of nerves and blood vessels wrapped and braided together to form a platform. If she didn't know any better, she'd say it looks like a stage? Yeah, it looks like a stage. And on that stage, constructed from a mixture of trash, string, fabric scraps, buttons, and other random objects, is a set. Paperclips stand tall with colorful buttons attached to the tips of them. At first glance, they resemble the giant lollipops that the movie theater put up for the screenings. And there, in the center of the stage, a long piece of brown ribbon is stretched out to mimic the chocolate river from the movie. A boat made from tinfoil and more of those nerves and blood vessels navigates the chocolate river. The employee was so taken aback by the sight of the makeshift set and stage that she didn't even notice the actors on the stage. When she does, she covers her mouth to stifle a scream. The stage and the set are absolutely covered in human teeth, moving around and putting on a production. On the boat, a tooth dressed in a purple jacket and orange top hat guides a tour group made up of other teeth dressed as the children and guardians from Willy Wonka. She opens the camera app on her phone, focuses it on the bizarre play unfolding in front of her, and begins to record. Otherwise, no one will ever believe what she saw here. Then, unable to do anything else, she watches the show. One tooth, a particularly rotund one, is sucked into a pipe out of the chocolate river with the help of practical effects from the nerves. The employee finds herself sitting on the ground, continuing to record the show. She laughs out loud at the sight of a tooth emerging from backstage, painted blue and wrapped in blue fabric to make it look larger and rounder. No, not blue. Violet. It's turning violet. Next, a tooth shrinks, exiting the stage and leaving behind a tiny fake tooth in its place. In between each transformation, another child leaving the chocolate factory tour, a group of orange-painted teeth comes out to perform a dance number. At first, the employee expects them to sing songs of disapproval too, but realizes quickly that these teeth don't have mouths of their own, and therefore can't sing. Still, it's all quite impressive. For the fizzy lifting drink scene, the teeth playing Charlie and Grandpa Joe are lifted up into the air by nerve tendrils, approaching a fan made from safety pins and aluminum foil. It's actually quite tense to watch, and if the employee had an actual seat, she'd be on the edge of it. Then, the show concludes, and an audience full of teeth that she couldn't see before stand up, clapping their tendrils together in a thunderous round of applause. It's the most bizarre thing she's ever seen in her life, but she can't deny that it was entertaining. The teeth then begin to clean up the set, striking pieces and tucking them away in the darkness. Once the set has been broken down, they all scuttle out of sight. And it's over. The employee drives home in a state of shock, uncertain about what to do next. She eventually decides to upload the video footage to the internet, titling the video, "Willy Wonka Performed by Teeth?" By the following day, it has a few thousand views and some skeptical comments. By the day after that, it has a copyright strike and has been removed from the internet. So much for getting the word out about the teeth. The employee never forgets about them, but she gives up on trying to tell people about what she saw. That tooth-based theatrical production is just for her memories now. Meanwhile, local dentists are noticing a pattern. Everyone who attended the screenings of Willy Wonka at that specific movie theater experienced dental issues, followed by sudden, unexplained tooth loss. It's such a concerning trend, it attracts the attention of the SCP Foundation, who began a thorough investigation. After some time looking into it, they designate the phenomenon SCP-3827. SCP-3827 is a cognitohazardous phenomenon that is known to affect certain movie theaters across the United States. Audience members at theaters impacted by SCP-3827 will later report statistically unusual rates of dental problems, including but not limited to gingivitis, pulpitis, and degradation of the dental enamel. It is unknown what exactly causes a theater to be subject to the influence of SCP-3827, but the effects of the anomaly can be exacerbated by the consumption of high-sugar concessions by moviegoers, by screenings of films that prominently feature teeth in at least one scene, or a combination of the two. If it were as simple as just an increase in dental problems, the anomaly might not warrant much Foundation attention, just an increase of fluoride in the local water supply and perhaps an alert to dentists in the surrounding area. However, it does not begin and stop at dental pain and discomfort. The living centers, or pulps, of affected teeth, referred to from now on as SCP-3827-A, will begin to noticeably change over the course of a week following exposure to the cognitohazard. They will grow and expand to the point of pain, causing the enamel of the affected teeth to crack and split from the internal pressure. After approximately a week has passed, the SCP-3827-A instances will eject themselves from the jaws of the affected person while they sleep. Once freed from the jaw, these teeth will push portions of their nerves and blood vessels through the cracks in the enamel, using them as limbs. Now capable of independent movement, the teeth will move themselves around the area, stealing small items such as loose trash, scraps of fabric, buttons, and pins. Once they have grabbed an object of interest, the teeth will attempt to leave the area. Sometimes the teeth are stopped by witnesses, a misplaced step, or a house pet, but frequently they make it out of the house and reach their intended destination. But where do they go next? Naturally, Foundation researchers were curious about the movements of SCP-3827-A instances, so one affected moviegoer was fitted with miniature tracking devices during a dental checkup at a Foundation-affiliated office. Later that night, when the teeth ejected themselves from the person's mouth, the Foundation was able to track them. The research team followed the tracking device's signal back to the movie theater where these SCP-3827 effects originated, where the affected individual had seen a screening of the then-recent film Life of Pi. The researcher who was tracking the signal followed it all the way to a small crevice in the concrete outside of the theater. He pulled a flashlight from his pocket and cast its light into the crevice. There, he spotted a structure resembling a small theater composed of chips of what appeared to be tooth enamel. On the makeshift stage, several dozen instances of SCP-3827-A were putting on a performance. From the animal costumes and the set piece of a boat constructed from aluminum foil, the agent was able to determine that the living teeth were performing their version of the events of Life of Pi. He stood there for the next hour, allowing them to finish their performance before collecting the instances and bringing them into Foundation containment. Notably, after some time in containment, the teeth began putting on original productions, in addition to live stagings of their favorite films. One original production was described by a research assistant as Star Wars, but with werewolves in it. He added that it was quite moving, actually. I cried. After SCP-3827 was identified and the Foundation was able to properly understand its nature, a set of containment procedures were put into place. Foundation agents embedded within the film industry have been instructed to introduce scenes and motifs involving teeth into films by major studios, particularly those belonging to especially successful franchises. This is intended to root out, no pun intended, theaters affected by SCP-3827. These theaters can then be closed down, the SCP-3827-A instances contained, and any affected individuals can be anesthetized. Contained instances of SCP-3827-A are kept in standard containment cells. As an incentive for good behavior, they are gifted with spare scraps of trash and may be shown a screening of a new film once a month. An addendum has been added to the official file, which I will include here for reference. Following successful Foundation interference with the production of the 2015 film Avengers: Age of Ultron, namely the inclusion of a short sequence depicting the character Iron Man knocking a tooth loose from the Hulk, Foundation agents managed to identify and close down 119 theaters affected by SCP-3827. Despite no new instances having been discovered since, current procedures are to continue until further notice. We go to movie theaters for magic, to laugh, to cry, to care. In my personal opinion, the movies are a sacred place, one where we shouldn't have to worry about our teeth jumping out of our skulls and running off to start a theater troupe. But in this world, things don't always go as planned. Hopefully, all of the theaters affected by SCP-3827 have been shut down for good, but you never know for sure. Sometimes, a film brings out emotions in you that you never expected. And sometimes, it brings out your teeth, too. Nobody likes going to the dentist. The smell of the chemicals, the sound of the drill, the indignity of talking with someone's hands in your mouth. But as you settle into the dentist's chair, something about this particular visit feels especially wrong. Why are the hygienists looking at you like that? Who is this strange doctor entering the room? And why does your mouth feel so full all of a sudden? You can't move, you can't scream, and your teeth, they're multiplying? The man has been ignoring his persistent toothache for several weeks, but he just can't take it anymore. The dull ache has become a head-pounding throb of pain that cuts through every single thought. But of course, he waited far too long to treat it, and now here he is on a Sunday evening, trying to find a dentist who will give him an appointment. It's not his fault, he tells himself. He's been terrified of the dentist since he was a little kid. It takes a lot of pain to counteract that kind of phobia, but now he's reached that threshold. As he's browsing the internet, desperate to find an office that's open on Sundays, he spots an ad. Dr. Hendricks, dentistry 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The man isn't sure how that's possible, but the pain has made him desperate, so he calls the number on the ad and makes an appointment. The receptionist sounds a bit funny on the phone, like she has something in her mouth, but he brushes it off. 15 minutes later, he's walking into the office and checking in at the reception desk. The woman sitting there looks a bit unusual, but his mother raised him not to stare, so he gives her a polite, distant nod, declines her request to inspect his teeth for herself, and ignores the strange feeling in his gut at her words. Instead, he continues on to the exam room and waits for the doctor to take his pain away. He waits for quite some time, until he begins to worry that the dentist forgot about him. Or perhaps this office really was too good to be true, and this is some sort of scam. But then the door opens, and in comes Dr. Hendricks with a cheerful demeanor and a smile in his eyes. His mouth is covered with a surgical mask, so the man can't be certain, but he seems like he's definitely smiling. It's a good thing the man came in so quickly, the dentist assures him. His teeth are in dire straits. But don't worry, he's in very, very good hands, and by the time he walks out of the office, he'll be in great shape. The man asks the dentist if he can be put under for the procedure in order to prevent him from panicking. The dentist laughs uproariously at this request, but he agrees. He places a gas mask over the man's face, and the hissing sound of the gas fills the room. The man's eyes grow heavy, and the sterile white room fades to black. When the man wakes up, he's sitting on the sidewalk outside of the office, a plastic bag of mini mouthwash clutched in his hand. And his mouth, oh God, his mouth. It's aching like nothing he's ever felt before. But something else is wrong too. He reaches up to feel around his mouth with his fingers, and all the color drains from his face. His mouth is absolutely crowded with teeth. So many teeth, his tongue can't move without poking up against them. He expected to leave the dentist with one tooth missing, but instead, somehow, he has 30 more than he started with. Unfortunately for this man, who only wanted to have a toothache treated, he stumbled into the clutches of SCP-5150. SCP-5150 is a dental office located outside the northwestern perimeter of Indianapolis, Indiana. The office building occupies an area of approximately 140 square meters, and the interior measures 115 square meters. The building is unremarkable in every way, with the exception of an electrical sign above the building's front entrance, which reads, Dr. John Hendricks, DDS. Inside the building, there are 6 rooms and several anomalous entities designated SCP-5150-1, SCP-5150-2, and SCP-5150-3. SCP-5150-1 is the dental office's receptionist. Of course, as you may have already gathered, she is no ordinary receptionist. The entity has standard humanoid features, with the exception of the oral cavity. The entity's maxillary and mandibular bones, or upper and lower jaw, are disfigured and mutilated and have been noted to have missing incisors, extra canines, and bleeding gums. The entity seems to have an intense interest in human teeth, and once she has gotten her hands on some, her anomalous properties will begin to manifest notably. She will insert stolen human teeth into her mouth and into her gums. This appears to be intended to correct the issues with her oral cavity, but the exact motivation for this behavior is still unknown. Anyone who enters SCP-5150 must interact with SCP-5150-1 at her reception desk in order to continue through or exit the building, regardless of how much aggression she displays toward them. SCP-5150-2 refers to several anomalous dental hygienists that populate the entirety of SCP-5150 with the exception of the waiting area. These entities resemble the receptionist but move more freely throughout the building rather than being confined behind a desk. They are similarly aggressive and will attack human subjects in order to apprehend them and bring them into one of the examination rooms. They carry a variety of dental instruments on their person and will happily use these instruments as weapons in order to subdue their victims. Once the hygienists have taken a human subject to an exam room, they will strap them to an operating table and prepare them to meet the remaining entity lurking within the office. Then it's time for the unfortunate human subject to meet the dentist himself, SCP-5150-3, also known as Dr. John Hendricks. This entity spends his time in the examination rooms as well as his personal office. When he is presented with a patient, he will begin to insert teeth directly into their mouth, where they will anomalously take root and result in extreme cases of hyperdontia. The source of these additional teeth is currently unknown. Once the operation is complete, and Dr. Hendricks is satisfied with the amount of teeth he has forced into his patient's mouth, he will then attempt to give the subject a plastic bag containing a variety of over-the-counter oral healthcare products. These can include a toothbrush, dental floss, mouthwash, and toothpaste. The subjects will not be allowed to leave the building without taking this bag with them. Analysis of these products has not revealed any anomalous properties. On July 9, 2023, the SCP Foundation conducted an investigation of SCP-5150. Subject D457142 was ordered to investigate and explore the building. He was equipped with a camera and microphone, as well as a chocolate bar, which was placed in his pocket for emergency use. Control lead was assigned to Bobby Daniels, and Marcus Drago and Andrew Fuller were additional team members on the investigation. D457142 approached the building, but hesitated before going inside. He asked what would happen after he entered the building, but Daniels refused to elaborate. His questions went unanswered. With no other option, D457142 entered the building. When he opened the door, a doorbell dinged to signal his entry. As the door closed behind him, he could hear a click as the lock slid into place. This sent the man into a state of anxiety, and he attempted to open the door. It wouldn't budge. He called out to Control over the microphone, begging them to unlock the door, promising that he would not run. Daniels at Control explained that he couldn't do anything about it, as the Foundation had no control over the doors. That lock was all SCP-5150's doing. After some hemming and hawing, D457142 had no option but to proceed and continue into the waiting area of SCP-5150. Inside, he saw a row of 4 chairs, a smattering of assorted toys common to any medical waiting room, and more chairs. There, off to the side, was the counter, and behind a sheet of glass with a small opening approximately 1.2 meters tall and 0.8 meters wide, the receptionist was waiting. Strangely, the camera feed was not able to pick up any of the receptionist's physical features, leaving the test subject alone to observe her and try to make sense of what he was seeing. Nothing was especially out of the ordinary in the room at first glance, aside from the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer playing on one of the waiting room TVs. The subject walked through the room, taking note of everything that he saw. Then he turned to face the receptionist. The receptionist was dressed in a white collared shirt with a white face mask covering her mouth. There was a sheet of paper directly in front of her. She greeted the test subject. "Hello, sir. Can I help you schedule an appointment?" Unsure of what else to do, the test subject played along. He asked her how to proceed with scheduling, and the receptionist handed him a pen and directed him toward the paper in front of her. She instructed him to sign and then wait for his appointment with Dr. Hendricks in 5 minutes. Once the subject signed the paper, the receptionist stated, "Now, before you can enter, there's one thing I'll need to see." The subject agreed, asking what she needed to see. The receptionist responded, "Your teeth, of course. May I see them?" As you might expect, the test subject found the request off-putting and inquired why she might need to see his teeth. She responded in a friendly tone, "I'm currently taking online classes for dentistry and I need experience. Occasionally patients will let me take a look at their teeth so I can predict how well an appointment with Dr. Hendricks will go. Will you let me try with you?" The subject relented, opening his mouth. As soon as he did, the receptionist reached out and grabbed hold of the lower left quadrant of the man's jaw. The receptionist praised the man's teeth, exclaiming how clean they were. Then she quickly pulled a pair of pliers from underneath her desk, clamping them to the bottom central incisors of the subject's mouth. She pulled toward herself with a sudden, sharp yank, extracting the teeth from the subject's mouth in less than 1 second. The test subject recoiled, clutching at his mouth and screaming in pain and shock. Blood dripped onto the camera lens as the subject struggled to wipe it away. He stumbled toward a nearby tissue box, grabbing a fistful of tissues to sop up the blood and stem the flow. Meanwhile, the receptionist went about her business. She stared at the 2 bloody teeth in her hand, admiration in her eyes. Next, she removed her face mask, revealing her disfigured oral cavity, and began to forcefully insert the new teeth into empty areas of her gums. As the subject backed away from the reception desk in horror, the receptionist called out, "Dr. Hendricks can see you now, sir. Please head to room 3 for your examination." Of course, the subject was reluctant to continue into the building, but Control insisted that he go through the door leading to the exam rooms. At first, he refused, but after a reminder that he was locked in and the promise of a medical team waiting for him after the investigation was finished, he saw no option but to move forward. So he tossed his bloody wad of tissue paper in the trash and pushed through the next set of doors. As before, he could hear the click of the lock behind him, trapping him inside. He stepped carefully into the hallway, pressing his body against the left side of the wall as the sudden sound of laughter echoed through the hall. Where was it coming from? Who could be laughing somewhere like this? He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. He continued through the hall, edging along the wall. Suddenly, he froze, crouching down to hide as one of the hygienists exited a nearby door. The entity passed him without noticing him, entering another exam room. The subject continued until he reached the far side of the hallway where a door with the nameplate John Hendricks was waiting. He opened the door and entered. There was no one inside. He checked in with Control, asking for instructions on what to do next. Control advised him to look for anything that could potentially be important. Documents, research papers, journal pages, anything that might shed some light on the nature of SCP-5150. He obeyed and began to search the desk, but found it was empty. Just then, the door to the office opened, and a hygienist called out to the subject, "What are you doing? We have another room waiting for you." At this point, cornered and with nowhere to run, the test subject grabbed his emergency chocolate bar and unwrapped it. At the sight of the sugary treat, the hygienist screamed and backed away. 2 other entities appeared, wielding sharp double-sided probes used during dental examinations. The 3 entities advanced toward the subject. In a panic, he threw the chocolate bar, and it collided with the 3rd hygienist. The entity shrieked, its mouth beginning to bleed as its teeth rapidly decayed. But now the subject was left unarmed and could not defend himself against the assault of the other 2 entities. They grabbed hold of him, one entity stabbing the subject with the probe, while the other bit down on his exposed forearm hard enough to draw blood and crack the bone. As he cried out in pain and fear, with no one able to save him, the subject was dragged to exam room 3. There, the hygienist strapped him down on an operating table, tying him in place with leather straps. "You can trust us, sir," one of the entities said. "We'll just need to pull some teeth before the dentist arrives." At this point, the entities removed the subject's 2 lower canines and 3 molars, all while he remained conscious and screaming. Then the door opened, and another entity came into the room. The doctor was in. At the sight of the dentist, the test subject began to spit various expletives. Dr. Hendricks met the verbal assault with an amused chuckle. "What a tongue! Why so harsh? Don't worry, this is for your own good. I know it may be scary, but it'll all be done with soon." The dentist spotted the camera, removing it from the subject's body. "Is this for a home video? Well, no matter. Technically, this does break some patient-doctor confidentiality laws, but I can let this one slide. Here, let me get this at an angle where it can record better." He placed the camera in the far right corner of the room, where it captured video of both the subject and Dr. Hendricks. All the while, the subject's mouth continued to bleed. The dentist continued to speak. "There we go, much better. Now, where were we? Oh, that's right. By the looks of it, it seems like they've already started. It's a shame. Your teeth aren't looking so great right now, but that's why you're here. I can help make it all better." The dentist retrieved several medical cleaning supplies from the side of the room, as well as an array of syringes. Then, he was ready to work. The test subject's nightmare was far from over. The dentist elevated the operating chair and inserted a Jennings gag device into the subject's mouth in order to keep it open. What happened next could have been briefly mistaken for an ordinary teeth cleaning, other circumstances aside. The dentist used a dental mirror and several tools to pick and scrape at the remaining teeth in the subject's mouth, as if checking for plaque and tartar. Next, however, things got a bit more gruesome. He swapped the probing tools for a dental drill and began to dig into the subject's gums and inner cheeks. The drill was used on the subject's mouth for a duration of 15 minutes. If you're concerned about the lack of anesthetic used during these procedures, allow me to clarify that various high-quality anesthetics were administered. However, they were injected in the wrong locations or at insufficient dosages to adequately reduce the subject's pain. Sadly, he was fully aware of every agonizing sensation. After 2 hours, the dentist cheerfully remarked, "We're almost done with the cleaning." He added, "You're doing just fine. See, I knew you wouldn't be so snappy after I started my work. Don't worry, I'll just have to do one more thing. But before I can do that, I'll have to move your camera. I can't allow this to be recorded. You understand, right?" He turned the camera so that the lens faced the wall, preventing any visuals of what happened next from being captured. This is especially unfortunate, given that this was the point in the procedure at which the dentist's anomalous abilities manifested. The nature of these abilities is still, sadly, unknown. All that was captured by the microphone was moans of pain and the sounds of crunching as the subject's new teeth crowded into his gum line. After 20 minutes, the procedure was complete, and the dentist handed the subject a bag filled with various oral care items. Eventually, the subject was able to exit the building. When he emerged, he was pale and shaking, with splatters of blood down his shirt and an extreme case of hyperdontia. There were so many teeth present in the subject's mouth that he was unable to speak coherently. He was then taken to Site 334's infirmary, where his hyperdontia was treated and he was debriefed. After treatment, he was given amnestics and released. At this point, any further experimentation with SCP-5150 was suspended, pending the judgment of the Ethics Committee. No follow-ups were conducted with the test subject. Still, I would be personally curious to know if his ordeal left him with a lifelong phobia of the dentist, even after the application of amnestics. I certainly don't believe I would ever be the same again. SCP-5150 was placed under containment within Provisional Site 334. A disinformation campaign and cover story for this provisional site was established concerning the fictional Hops Railroad Company. This was intended to hide SCP-5150 and any of its related media, including poster advertisements, newspaper articles, and social media posts. In the event of unauthorized access to SCP-5150, all personnel were required to be detained and immediately transferred to the on-site infirmary upon exiting the building. Excess teeth would be removed and stored there, and personnel would be given a thorough evaluation before being given Class C amnestics. All on-site personnel who interacted with SCP-5150 in an approved capacity were required to carry one candy bar containing a minimum of 35 grams of sugar at all times. You may be wondering why these containment procedures are detailed in the past tense. Well, there's a reason for that choice. The current containment procedures are no longer up to date, as the anomaly is no longer adequately contained. As of August 1, 2023, the building originally designated as SCP-5150 is completely absent of anomalous entities or paranormal activity. It is unknown how or why this shift took place, but the anomaly appears to have moved rather than disappeared. On September 22, 2023, posters advertising the dental practice of one Dr. John Hendricks were reported near the city of Greenwood, Indiana. All personnel assigned to Provisional Site 334 have been given a new directive: relocate and recontain SCP-5150 wherever it is migrated to. The dental health of innocent people depends on it. Remember to take good care of your teeth, brush and floss every day, and be sure to attend your regular dental checkups. And of course, always count your teeth before and after an appointment, just in case. The dentist is clocking out after an especially long day. A root canal, a wisdom tooth extraction, too many cavities to count, when her cell phone rings. She answers and is surprised to hear the panicked voice of her wife on the other line. Her heart stops for a moment as she imagines the worst: a car accident, a house fire. But after listening for a moment, she's able to gather enough context to relax. Their son lost his first tooth today. There was a bit of blood on his face, which had sent her wife into a bit of a state. But now, as they both realize it was nothing more than a standard rite of passage, the moment of terror is over. When the dentist arrives home, she finds her wife and son sitting at the kitchen table with dinner ready, and her wife is in the middle of a story. She's telling their son, who listens wide-eyed and rapt, all about the magical creature known as the Tooth Fairy. Later that night, after they've read the boy a story and put him to bed, the two mothers remind him to put his freshly lost tooth under his pillow. When he wakes up, they promise the tooth fairy will have left him a surprise. They wait for him to fall asleep, and then, when they hear his gentle snoring, it's time for the swap. The mother who works with teeth all day opts to do the honors. It only seems fair. She sneaks into the room, careful not to wake the boy, and lifts the edge of his pillow. Hang on. What happened to the tooth? She can't see it anywhere. She lifts the pillow just a bit more, but she can't find it. What she sees instead is a fluttering motion as something small and winged darts out from underneath the pillow. She covers her mouth to stifle a startled scream. It's just a moth, she realizes, as the little winged shape darts around the darkened room. Nothing to worry about. The tooth probably got lost in the sheets. Nothing to worry about. She slips a quarter under the pillow and sneaks back out of the room. She doesn't stay long enough to see the little winged creature, the thing she thinks is a moth, fly toward her son's face, landing in his open mouth. The next morning, the boy is delighted to find a shiny quarter under his pillow. He is less delighted to find that he has come down with a sudden case of the sniffles and sneezes. As the dentist heads off for another day of work, her wife calls out from her own job, opting to keep the boy home from school today, just in case. Meanwhile, the dentist is hard at work once more. Today is a bit less stressful than yesterday, but not by a wide margin. Her first patient of the day refuses to sit still while she checks for cavities, nearly kicking her in the process. After they leave, she takes a moment in the back with a cup of coffee, centering herself. When she walks back into the waiting room, she sees her wife sitting there with their son. What are they doing here? She asks her wife, and sees tears in her eyes as she struggles to answer. She turns to their son and asks him what's wrong. He doesn't say a word. Instead, he just opens his mouth. The tooth he lost the day before has grown back. But that's not all. His mouth is full of teeth. And that is not hyperbole. There are teeth all across the roof of his mouth, the insides of his cheeks, covering his tongue. The dentist suspects that if she shone a light down his throat, she would see teeth all the way down. She'd better call in a specialist, because this is no job for an ordinary dental practitioner. It isn't her fault. She could never have been prepared for her son to come down with a case of SCP-478. SCP-478 is a species of small entities of varying size and shape, which resemble a darkly colored butterfly or moth when in flight. Though they have been encountered in the wild frequently, they are elusive and difficult to capture. Instances of SCP-478 that have been contained do not appear to have a need for food, sleep, air, or reproduction. There is still little known about the nature and motives of SCP-478, but this much is clear. They are predatory in nature and tend to target humans under the age of 25, especially those who have not yet lost all of their deciduous teeth. When an instance of SCP-478 finds its prey, it will enter the victim's mouth while they sleep and attach itself to the soft palate in the upper nasal cavity, blocking one of the nostrils. After the creature has embedded there, the victim's body will begin to produce an excess of mucus. With the stuffy nose and increased mucus production, the victim will wake to believe they have come down with a cold. A bit of an annoyance, sure, but nothing some rest, lots of fluids, and a bit of grandma's chicken soup recipe can't cure. That would be true if it were, in fact, a cold. But as the condition progresses, the victim soon realizes that they have come down with more than a case of the sniffles. Soon after waking up, the victim's palate will begin to generate teeth at a rate far faster than ordinary tooth growth. The more teeth grow in, the faster they grow, and the more quickly they spread. These teeth will continue to sprout from the palate, more and more teeth emerging through the skin, until the entire palate has been covered. But it doesn't stop there. Oh no. It continues down the victim's throat and into the esophagus. Over the next several days, usually between 2 and 4, the growth of teeth will continue down into the stomach lining, filling the stomach. Then, teeth will begin to grow in the lungs, making it difficult to breathe, then will grow from the subcutaneous layer of skin. The law of conservation of matter comes into play as these teeth sprout. The calcium required to produce them can't just come from thin air. It must come from somewhere in the body. In this case, that would be the skeleton. Skeletal calcium is leached away to provide new teeth with the material they require. As you might imagine, this process is extremely painful and downright unpleasant in every way. Now, there's no polite way to put this. The ultimate stage of the infestation involves teeth growing downward through the digestive tract. The growth stops once the entire digestive tract has been filled with teeth. Then, the SCP-478 instance will fly out through the victim's mouth, leaving the tooth-filled victim behind. These teeth are, aside from their placement, ordinary. They contain a root, nerve, enamel, just like any tooth you might find in a mouth. You know, where teeth are ordinarily found. The parts of the body where the teeth have formed may expose them to unusual conditions, such as the high concentration of acid in the stomach. Teeth that form within the skin, on the other hand, group together and form large, hard masses of dental material beneath the surface of the skin. The method by which SCP-478 induces this heightened growth of dental tissue is currently a mystery. At first, Foundation research into the nature of the anomalous beings resulted in few leads. But then, one potential lead emerged in an unlikely place. In order to understand the nature of this lead, then I must first take us back in time to the year 1956. Dr. Razman Yelkov was issued a task by his comrade, Dr. Grigory. Grigory asked Yelkov to develop a method that would allow him to produce perfect specimens of human teeth, new, authentic specimens not taken from a cadaver or made from an alternative material. It seemed like an impossible task, until a fellow doctor told him stories of an unnamed man who had found something impossible. Tooth fairies. Dr. Yelkov's colleague brought him to the man with no name, who told him all about these fairies. While traveling during the war in search of remedies, the man said that he met and captured a fairy called Isabella. This Isabella taught the unnamed doctor the fairy language and appointed herself his assistant. From there, Isabella taught the unnamed doctor about the methodology of the fairies, how they could draw enamel from human bones, and how they used that enamel as a source of nutrients to sustain themselves. Naturally, Dr. Yelkov had his doubts about the strange man's claims. He asked for proof, as any of us might in the face of fairy tales, and the doctor with no name was happy to provide it. He took Dr. Yelkov to his workshop, and upon stepping through the door, the doctor was met with a sight of at least 50 fairies fluttering around the room, their dark, iridescent wings beating as they flitted to and fro. This was it, the secret key he had been looking for, the way to unlock the seemingly impossible task he had been issued. The man offered Dr. Yelkov a room for the night, and he accepted, with the intent of learning more about the secrets of the fairies in the morning. But the events of the evening did not go according to plan. When Dr. Yelkov offered to purchase some of the fairies from the man, in order to use them for his own research, the offer was refused. Dr. Yelkov, ever the ruthless pragmatist, drew his weapon and fired one single shot through the unnamed doctor's heart. With no one left to stop him, he grabbed a large jar and began to capture the fairies. He managed to catch 30 of them in total before setting off on the journey back to his own laboratory. Once Dr. Yelkov was back in his laboratory, he examined the fairies more thoroughly. They looked like ordinary butterflies at first glance, but a closer look revealed humanoid characteristics: arms, hands, legs, and faces. While inspecting, and performing autopsies on, several of the creatures, Dr. Yelkov determined that the specimens contained unidentified chemicals which react with the oral environment. He isolated these chemicals for further study. Now, the real work could begin. Dr. Yelkov analyzed the way in which the fairies' physiology interacted with sodium monofluorophosphate and hexafluorosilicic acid, and in doing so, was able to reproduce the effects a fairy might have on a human body, recreating it on a common fungus. This was not enough for a finished product, however, as the fungus had no source of calcium that would allow for the formulation of human teeth. He would have to test his new research on human subjects in order to truly gauge its effectiveness. For his first test subject, he selected an 8-year-old child from a camp in Moscow. She was injected with 20 milliliters of the serum he had managed to develop and observed for 10 days without any notable changes. Then, on the 11th day of the trial, the patient was short of breath and complaining of abdominal pain. An X-ray showed a large mass beneath her left lung. 2 days later, the patient was dead, and Dr. Yelkov extracted a large mass of calcium from her lower left abdomen. The cause of death was massive internal bleeding caused by this very mass. Over the course of several more human trials, Dr. Yelkov fine-tuned his serum. It was producing calcified masses in the bodies of the subjects, sure, but Dr. Grigory was expecting teeth. He was getting closer, though. By trial 4, he had managed to create teeth, though they were undeveloped and had not fully grown to the proper size and shape. But it was progress, grim and gruesome as the process was. By trial 19, he had cracked it. The test subject was the teenage daughter of an American businessman named Kyle Schrader, a man so greedy and craven he had sold his own child for medical testing, all for a hefty chunk of change, $2.6 million, courtesy of Dr. Yelkov's patron, Dr. Grigori. This trial was, frankly, horrific to read. I've pored over some disturbing scientific documents in my time, but never something that distressed me quite so much as the tale of a teenage girl sold by her father, made a lab rat by a mad doctor, treated without anesthesia, and lobotomized when she complained. But Dr. Yelkov did not see it as a horror. He was simply elated that his labor had yielded that most calcium-rich of fruits, teeth. He packaged the extracted tooth specimens and sent them to Dr. Grigori for approval, along with 7 other dental practitioners. Now, I am not one to express a belief in karma, per se, and Dr. Grigori's exact fate is unconfirmed to this day, but I can believe we can extrapolate what became of him based on what the Foundation learned about Dr. Yelkov's work. And if my guess is correct, then I believe Dr. Grigori got exactly what was coming to him. When SCP Foundation agents raided Dr. Yelkov's laboratory, they discovered a series of phenomena that were later designated SCP-1994. These, as we can now surmise, were the results of Dr. Yelkov's research with SCP-478. SCP-1994-1 is a serum, the chemical makeup of which has been rather difficult to pin down. Some samples of the serum have had higher levels of sodium monofluorophosphate, while others have had higher levels of hexafluorosilicic acid. Either way, application of this serum stimulates the growth of both maxillary and mandibular tooth structures, all outside of their usual environment of the human mouth. These resulting structures are classified SCP-1994-2, and though they appear identical to human teeth at first glance, they lack the basic structures of teeth. For example, they have no dentin layer or pulp tissue. They are simply solid pieces of dental enamel and are highly vulnerable to decay. As these enamel pieces decay, they release a white powder that is capable of infecting those who inhale it with a version of SCP-478's effects. Individuals infected with SCP-1994-2 powder, or who have been administered a dose of SCP-1994-1 serum, are termed SCP-1994-3. Once exposed, the infection progresses through 5 stages. First, there is initial exposure, after which the subject has no visible signs of infection for up to 2 weeks. Notably, this infection works far less quickly than a direct infestation of SCP-478. During this 2-week period, calcium deposits will begin to develop throughout the person's body as cell structures ordinarily used for immune system response will reorient to become capable of gathering the components for producing enamel. After the 2-week period is up, and these calcium deposits have been effectively cooking under the skin the entire time, the subject will begin to develop cysts all over their skin, beginning on the limbs before progressing to the head, neck, back, and groin. These cysts are painful to the touch, and the subject will be compelled to resist any attempts to remove them in spite of the pain and discomfort. As the cysts grow and spread, they will rupture the skin and slowly decrease the metabolic functions of the subject. At a point approximately 5 weeks after initial exposure, the cysts will burst open, revealing the mature, adult human tooth that has been growing beneath the surface. Once the tooth has emerged, it cannot be removed from the skin tissue except via surgery. Once the subject has reached this stage, the breakouts of teeth will occur faster and faster, spreading until they have covered all of the extremities, and then will begin to manifest in the soft tissues of the palate, the inner ear, and ocular tissues, spreading to every orifice. This stage of the infection resembles an infestation of SCP-478, though the teeth are lacking the interior nerve and pulp present in those created by SCP-478. Though the teeth may be removed through surgery, as I mentioned, the surgery is only a temporary fix. After any teeth are removed from the body, new growths will form in their place. After 8 weeks following initial infection, the entire body of the subject will be covered in a layer of teeth, or SCP-1994-2. But then, it all gets even worse. The teeth will begin to develop carious lesions across all of their surfaces. It is unknown how these teeth decay, given the fact that they are not exposed to any acid-producing oral bacteria. But they do decay just the same, and the process is highly unpleasant. Over the course of no more than 7 days, all the thousands of teeth across the subject's body begin to show signs of gross decay and release that aforementioned infectious white powder. This is possibly due to the use of fungus in the serum's development phase, as this white powder is somewhat reminiscent of fungal spores. After the subject's body is covered in fully rotten teeth, they will perish in the ultimate stage of infection. The cause of death is due to the combination of weakened immune system, exposure to massive amounts of decay, and the inability to eat anything or receive nutrition intravenously. No subjects have lived longer than 2 weeks past full decay. SCP-1994 was discovered during a raid conducted by the Foundation in collaboration with GRU Division P operatives in the former USSR in 1959. When they raided the laboratory, the Foundation discovered 9 instances of SCP-1994-3. 7 had already died, and 2 were decaying. Dr. Yelkov was nowhere to be found, but the Foundation did recover his notes and journals. The fairies he spoke of in his notes were also nowhere to be found, and the Foundation was unable to confirm their existence for several years. But then, they discovered an instance of SCP-478 in the wild. Dr. Yelkov really had encountered these creatures, captured them, studied them. Any instances of SCP-478 that are found are to be surgically removed from their victims before death and kept in one piece. After they have been recovered, they must be kept in specialized vacuum-sealed lockers in Biosite 66. As instances of SCP-478 do not appear to be able to pass through solid matter, they may be held indefinitely, as long as no damage occurs. Victims who have only been mildly affected by SCP-478 may be given ordinary treatment in a civilian medical establishment, though Foundation surgeons must perform the procedure under the guise of orthodontic surgery. As with ordinary surgery, the patient must be sedated. Victims who have been severely affected by SCP-478 must be taken to Biosite 16 for study. Because of the unique way in which SCP-478 works, infected individuals must not be terminated prematurely. Victims who have been deemed capable of a full recovery are to be treated for infection and released from Foundation custody. After recovering, they must be given a Class B amnestic, and false memories must be planted as to avoid arousing any suspicion. Though the process of infection that SCP-1994-3 instances go through shares some symptoms with an SCP-478 infestation, many of the symptoms differ dramatically. This in particular interests me. It would seem that the chemical components produced by SCP-478 are not the only factor in their effects on the human body. Something else must be responsible, something that requires the physical presence of one of these so-called fairies, rather than just the compounds they secrete or the chemical reactions they cause. Though I disagree deeply with his methodology, I can see why Dr. Yelkov was so compelled to study these creatures. If the Foundation is ever able to track down Dr. Yelkov, provided he is still alive, they may be able to discover more about these tooth fairies. If Dr. Yelkov had left the other nameless researcher alive, he might have learned even more about them. How to communicate with them, for example. If that other man's story is to be believed, these beings are sentient. They have names, their own language, and are capable of intelligent communication. Maybe, with some further study and some cooperative living specimens, the Foundation could learn the secrets of the fairy language just as the other doctor did. Imagine the possibilities if we could speak to these creatures. Perhaps they could ask them why it is they do what they do to us. Perhaps they could broker some sort of peace between the species. Perhaps, and this might be naively optimistic of me, they could ask them to stop. In the meantime, if you find a quarter under your pillow, make sure to check the inside of your mouth. You might just find an uninvited guest.
Tell me if it starts to hurt, the dentist says before reaching into your mouth with a pair of orthodontic pliers and starting to pull your front teeth back into place. Evidently, your screams aren't enough of an indication of the extreme pain you feel because he doesn't stop pulling. After what feels like hours of excruciating oral surgery, you're finally standing outside the dentist's office texting with a friend. "Come on, show me. It can't be that bad," reads the message from your friend. You're nervous to send her a picture, though, since you have a small crush on the girl and you don't want her to see you in this state. But after she asks you again, you decide to take a quick selfie and send it to her anyway. You snap a photo of your mangled mouth and jaw. The mess of wires had to be hastily applied to move your remaining crooked teeth back into place with globs of fast-hardening epoxy, and the result looks like a low-budget horror movie prosthetic. You send the message and wait. You watch the dots appear that indicate she's writing a response, then watch as they disappear without a reply. You sadly slip the phone back into your pocket and begin walking away. As you make your way home with your head hung in shame, you keep your mouth shut tight. You don't want any passersby to see what you've become. You decide to detour through the park to avoid any people as much as possible, and as you walk, you decide to stop at a picnic table next to a small pond. You sit at the table and watch the ducks mill about in the water. They have it so lucky, you think. Ducks never have to worry about their teeth getting knocked out by a baseball and leaving them looking like a monster. The ducks suddenly all start moving away from your side of the pond, eventually taking flight and leaving completely. You get the sense that they're trying to get away from something, and you turn around, but there's nothing behind you. Oh, it must be me, you think. But then you get the sense that there is something behind you, and turn again. Still though, there's nothing. It's just you, the picnic table, and the empty pond. You turn back to watch the still water, but you can't shake the feeling that there's someone behind you, and turn again. Hello? Is anyone there? You ask, but no one answers. You turn back to the pond and you scream in fright at the thing standing before you and fall back off the picnic table. You get up out of the dirt and you don't wait to stick around to see who or what this thing is. You start to run as fast as you can, but you immediately hear it chasing after you. Instinctually, you take out your phone and start trying to take pictures of whatever it is that's behind you. You know no one will ever believe you, and you want some evidence of this thing. You manage to snap off a couple of pictures, but you can hear the creature gaining on you. You scream as your mouth begins to ache. Perhaps running this soon after your surgery is causing your damaged teeth to shift, and the pain is intense. It starts to feel like your mouth is full of jagged rocks, but you can feel that it is your teeth pushing out and stabbing into your mouth. You take one last picture before the creature leaps on you, sending you both to the ground, and your phone tumbling into the dirt. Early the next morning, a police perimeter has been set up in the park. The detective arrives and walks past the traumatized-looking jogger who must have been the one that discovered the grisly scene. An officer guarding the site lifts up the police tape so the detective can enter the crime scene that surrounds a body lying under a white sheet. The detective asks the officer if they've found anything yet, and the officer hands the detective a plastic bag containing a dirty cell phone. The detective puts on a latex glove and removes the phone from the bag. The screen is cracked, but it still works. There's numerous messages on the screen that look like they're from someone trying to apologize for not responding sooner, and asking where the phone's owner is and if they're mad at her. The detective opens the phone's camera app and starts looking at the last photos that were taken. It's a strange series of pictures. They seem to all be selfies that a young man was taking as he ran through the park. It almost appears as though there's a figure behind him, but it's hard to tell. There's a foggy white vignette on the pictures that gets worse the further he looks, slowly closing in until the last photo is nothing but a blurred milky white screen. The detective flips the phone over and looks at the lens, which you can see is completely covered in a hard white substance. The detective places the phone back in the evidence bag and kneels down next to the body. The police officer turns away. He's already seen the victim and doesn't need to again. The detective pulls down the sheet to reveal a truly shocking sight. The boy's mouth is a mess of teeth, far, far too many teeth. There are teeth growing out of every part of his gums at horrible angles, filling his mouth and jutting out at painfully odd angles. Who could have done this? What could have done this? The local police department may not have had any idea what the state of this victim meant, but the SCP Foundation did, because they had seen the same occurrence dozens of times before. In fact, they had seen it happen so many times that they had classified this anomalous entity as SCP-4910, but it had already earned a much more ominous nickname within the Foundation. It was known as the Grinner. Very little is known about SCP-4910, and eyewitness accounts of the creature are all extremely brief due to those who have interacted with it quickly succumbing to its effects. What is known is that SCP-4910 is a quadruped and appears to be made partially, or perhaps entirely, out of teeth. Those who encounter SCP-4910 quickly experience its primary anomalous effect, which is that it causes the extremely rapid overproduction of teeth in its victims' mouths. Existing teeth will quickly increase in size, protruding farther out of the gums than should be able, while new teeth will begin to sprout from any available space in the mouth, including the roof of the mouth and underneath the tongue. These new teeth will completely fill the mouth, which almost immediately inhibits their ability to speak or vocalize at all. The creature will then use this opportunity to attack and incapacitate the victim before starting to feed. Further adding to the mystery of SCP-4910's appearance comes from the effect it has on any nearby recording equipment. Cameras and other devices that come within SCP-4910's proximity will have their critical components compromised by a sudden appearance of a layer of dentin, which is the calcified material that partially makes up teeth. Interestingly, SCP-4910 seems to possess some level of intelligence, as it appears able to differentiate between normal civilians, who it hunts for sustenance, and members of organizations that seek to hunt down and contain or harm it, which it uses for an even more nefarious purpose. While the exact mechanics are still unclear, it seems as though SCP-4910 is able to infect certain anomalous organization members with its ability, causing them to act as a vector for the effect, who then spread it to even more victims. This effect is, of course, of great concern to the Foundation, and containment protocols for infected victims have been hastily put into place. Should a member of staff begin bearing a grin with too many teeth or multiple tooth-filled smiles, they are to be immediately immobilized by any means necessary, though preferably with a firearm that allows one to keep an appropriate distance and hopefully prevent any further spread of the effect. The infected individual is then to be doused in a hydrochloric chemical compound that will reduce the afflicted to a pulp-like substance. Once this pulp is no longer animate, it can be transferred to the closest incineration site for disposal. Should a member of personnel have an interaction with SCP-4910 and feel that they were exposed to its anomalous effects, they may be saved by taking immediate medical action. Oral surgery to remove the additional teeth has been found to be effective when the procedure is undergone in the first 1 to 2 hours following exposure, though the victim will suffer lifelong permanent physical issues from the procedure. Once 3 hours have passed, the effect will have spread to the rest of the body, with teeth appearing virtually anywhere. Unfortunately for the victim, should the infection reach this point, pain management has been shown to be ineffective, and there is nothing that can be done to alleviate their suffering, save for termination. SCP-4910 remains at large and has been given the Keter classification. Mobile Task Force Epsilon, codenamed Turfing Black, is the only MTF authorized to respond to sightings, and they have been given permission to engage the creature and utilize lethal force if necessary, due to the danger this anomaly presents specifically to the SCP Foundation.
A young woman steps onto her bathroom scale. She holds her breath and squeezes her eyes shut, afraid to see the results as she listens to the dial spinning. When it slows to a stop, she opens her eyes and looks down. She balks at the result. 150 pounds! That's unacceptable in her eyes. She steps off the scale and examines her reflection in the full-length mirror. In truth, her weight is far from out of control, but when she looks at herself, she can't help but see flaws. The subtle ring of pudge around her middle, the way her butt sticks out just a little too far for her liking, the very faint thickness around her cheeks and chin that hint at her history of snacking. As she leaves the bathroom, she reflects on her situation. Of course she's gaining weight. How could it be any other way? For the last 2 years, she's been in lockdown during a pandemic, and she's barely left her apartment. She let her gym membership lapse, and instead of cycling to work, she's instead taking the easy way out by just driving. And it's not like she gets much exercise in her free time either. During these last 2 years of isolation, she's mostly stayed in and watched television. She's discovered a particular love for trashy daytime talk shows and court dramas. Intellectually, she knows that they're the equivalent of junk food, but at the same time, there is a certain mindless charm to them. She would be embarrassed to admit it to any of her friends, but she does enjoy just turning off her brain and absorbing some silly talk show about professional stunt dwarves or Satan-worshipping furry juggalos. That sort of entertainment has been a boon to get her through the tough times. Nevertheless, it's time to make a change. She promises herself that she's going to get into shape. Today, instead of vegging out on the couch, she's going to make an effort. She's going to go out and get some exercise, and she tells herself she's going to watch those extra pounds melt away right before her eyes. She hopes that her old gym clothes will still fit her. After all, she's definitely put on some extra weight since her last trip to the gym. After rummaging through her drawers, she finds what she's looking for, her spandex gym shorts and sports bra. She quickly changes her clothes and is relieved to see that, although they might be a little snugger than she would like, they still fit her pretty well. That's a good sign. She probably won't even have to work very hard to get herself down to her ideal weight. It's all a matter of willpower, she tells herself. I was fit before, so that means I should be able to do it again. All I have to do is avoid temptation. I'll just have to make sure I stay active instead of watching trash TV all day. After all, I don't want to rot my brain too much. On the first day, she actually does an admirable job of sticking to her plan. She cycles to work, enjoying the fresh air and the reassuring post-workout burn in her legs that let her know that she's making progress. She throws away all the junk food in her refrigerator and goes shopping for healthy fruits and vegetables. And, most important of all, she limits her television time. She knows that trashy TV is probably her biggest addiction, even more than junk food, so she needs to be careful of that. On the second day, though, she notices something strange. She starts off with a simple, healthy breakfast, just some granola and a glass of juice. It's barely enough to satisfy her, but she knows that she has to make sacrifices if she expects to actually lose any weight. After breakfast, she decides to go out for a jog. As she's out on the street, she's overcome with sudden hunger. Of course, that's to be expected. She's on a diet now, so it's going to take some time to adjust to these smaller meals. She puts her hand to her rumbling stomach and grimaces. She's never felt this hungry before. If she didn't know better, she would think that she hadn't eaten for a week with the amount of pain that she's feeling. In fact, she's actually starting to feel a little woozy, and she has to lean against a light post to keep from fainting. She shakes her head to clear her thoughts. Okay, she thinks, I must have misjudged how many calories I need to get me through a morning. Her eyes stray to a nearby coffee shop. She sighs in relief. She thinks to herself, I'll just pop in there and get myself a small snack, just a little something to keep my blood sugar up. She walks into the cafe and gets in line. As she waits, she can't help but stare at the rows of pastries on display under the glass. They all look delicious, and she is really hungry. She fully intends to only get a bagel with a little smear of cream cheese, but when she gets to the counter, she finds herself ordering way too much food. I'd like 2 scones, 3 danishes, and a bear claw, she says. Also a large super raspberry frappuccino with extra syrup and whipped cream. The words just tumble out of her mouth, almost as if it's not her saying them, but rather some other voice speaking through her mouth. What the? I didn't say that, she stammers. The clerk behind the counter eyes her strangely, and the young woman feels too embarrassed to protest further. She steps aside and waits for her order, pondering the strange event that just happened. Is she possessed? She's not a superstitious person, but she can't think of any other explanation for what just happened. She can admit to herself that she has broken down and lost to temptation over a tasty snack in the past, but this is ridiculous. Eventually, when the clerk hands her the order, she rationalizes the whole thing away. I must just be having a hunger hallucination, she says to herself. Obviously, I need to be a little more careful about not being so strict about my diet. I'm sure if I just eat sensibly, I won't have an experience like that again. Her stomach grumbles again, reminding her of the original reason why she stepped into this coffee shop. She retreats to a table in the corner and tears open the bag. She wolfs down her pastries with gusto and slurps at her rich, creamy drink. When she's finished, she sighs in satisfaction, although the uncomfortable full feeling in her belly reminds her of her predicament. She only meant to eat enough to keep her from fainting, but instead, she's eating herself silly, and it's only day 2 of the diet. This does not bode well. Okay, she tells herself, this is my last cheat. From now on, I'm going to be serious about this diet. She stands up and leaves the cafe, ready to complete the rest of her jog. But then, something even stranger happens. On the television, the matriarch of the family is furious. She has forbidden her daughter from marrying the gardener because she believes that he is too low class for her high-born daughter. But what she doesn't realize is that her daughter is in love and that she is determined to make it work. The daughter and the gardener have eloped, and the matriarch is hiring a private detective to track them down. Meanwhile, the matriarch's long-lost twin brother, whom she thought died in a plane crash in the tropics, has actually been alive the entire time. He has been in a South American hospital recovering from amnesia, but now he returns to the family estate, ready to claim his share of the inheritance. These events are all noted by the family's shady lawyer, who has big plans to usurp the family fortune himself. Unbeknownst to the family, he is actually secretly working for their mortal enemies and business rivals to destroy them. The young woman laughs, shoving a handful of potato chips into her mouth. Oh man, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes now. That lawyer is playing them all like fiddles. Suddenly, she startles, as if she's just waking up. Where is she? Wasn't she just in that coffee shop? How is it that she's at home? And why is she eating potato chips? She was sure that she threw out all the junk food in the house. She must have bought a bag on her way back home from jogging, but she literally cannot remember it. And what is she doing now? Watching television and eating junk food? In disgust, she grabs the remote and shuts off the TV. She was supposed to be jogging, and instead, she's sitting at home and watching stupid soap operas. The thing that worries her the most is her apparent blackout. She remembers nothing about her trip home from the coffee shop, although the evidence of the potato chip bag indicates that she must have stopped at a convenience store or supermarket on the way home. How could she forget something like that? I really must be having a blood sugar issue, she tells herself reassuringly, even though deep down, she knows that can't be the case. She had the blackout after eating the pastries at the coffee shop, so that can't be the cause.
But she really doesn't want to think about that, so she puts it out of her head with a renewed promise to commit to her exercise and fitness program. Over the next few days, she makes a valiant effort to keep her promise. She cycles when she can, she jogs when she remembers, and yet, the blackouts continue. And no matter where she is when she loses her memory, she always recovers in the same place. Back home on her couch, always in the middle of eating some fatty junk food, always staring at the television set. Sure, she's always had an unhealthy television habit, and she knows that trashy talk shows and silly soap operas are her biggest weakness, but it doesn't make any sense that she would be seeking them out when she's in some kind of fugue state, right? As the weeks roll by, the young woman finds that her weight keeps rising. When she steps onto the bathroom scale, she's shocked to see that the dial points to 200 pounds. She's doing everything right, she thinks. How is that possible? How is it possible that she's ballooned up an extra 50 pounds since deciding to slim down? She can't fit into her old gym clothes anymore. She can barely tug the spandex shorts up to her thighs, and even if she could, she's afraid that they're going to split apart. In desperation, she switches to an old stretchy sweatsuit. It's the only thing that she owns that still fits her. This is just a temporary setback, she tells herself as she stares at her bloated reflection in the bathroom mirror. I just have to work harder. And she does. Or does she? When she goes to ride her bike, she finds that it's no longer strong enough to support her weight. She can't perch on the seat comfortably, and the steel body frame starts to creak when she rests her full weight upon it. She steels her resolve. Sure, it might be embarrassing to go out in public wearing an ill-fitting sweatsuit and riding a bike groaning under her bulk, but she really has no choice. This time, she's going to do it. And she probably did ride her bike to work, right? She's not sure. The next thing that she knows, she's back at home, spread across the couch, basking in the comforting glow of the television. The floor is covered in empty bags and cartons, and her face is slathered with crumbs and sauce. The last thing that she remembers is that she was just about to go for a bike ride, but now she's back at home, and it looks like she just completely ruined her diet. She lifts her arm with some effort and stares at her watch. She's lost almost a whole day. That's the longest blackout yet. She must have gone out cycling and made her way home, where she decided to reward herself for her strenuous efforts with a little snack. That's the only logical explanation. She tries to reassure herself that maybe she's past the worst of it, but she finds that these mysterious blackouts keep happening. They happen while she's at work, while she's at the gym, while she's out cycling, but she always comes to in the same place, sitting on her sofa at home, in front of the TV, surrounded by the debris of a massive meal. Again, she wonders if maybe she's having some sort of reaction to her new low-calorie diet. Maybe she's been cutting back so far on her food intake that she's starting to have fainting spells. Maybe her diet food is tainted in some way. But that doesn't explain why she keeps gaining weight. The scale in her bathroom doesn't lie. It keeps reporting higher and higher numbers, and as much as she tries to reassure herself that it must just be broken, her ever-tightening clothes and ever-widening reflection tell her otherwise. Her trips to the gym become less and less frequent, as she finds that other patrons have started to stare and whisper about her. Are they laughing at her for not being able to control her weight? Are they whispering about how her new flab is spilling from the confines of her sweatsuit? She can't even run on the treadmill for more than a few minutes without being completely winded, and she's too wide to balance on her bike now. The young woman has grown absolutely massive, to the point that she completely fills the whole couch. She chews her way through yet another bag of potato chips, her eyes never straying from the ever-chattering television set. She barely moves from the spot, her tremendous girth sinking into a permanent groove in the cushions as the couch springs groan. She barely notices, however, because she's much too intent on enjoying herself. She loves to eat, and every bite brings her untold joy, her taste buds tingling with delight. She is constantly full, so much so that she feels slightly sick, so bloated that she feels like she might just burst, but she's powerless to resist the siren call of junk food. She scarfs down entire boxes of cookies and cartons of ice cream without a thought, having turned into the very definition of a mindless eater. Only occasionally does she rouse herself from this stupor of gorging, to reach for her telephone, to order more takeout or more grocery delivery, always choosing the most calorie-laden options. Other than eating, her attention is completely devoted to her television set. She watches a constant stream of daytime talk shows, laughing along with the studio audience as the hosts parade out an assortment of society's biggest freaks. Sometimes she'll switch the channel to watch soap operas, becoming so wrapped up in the ridiculous plot twists and melodramatic acting that she completely forgets the passage of time. Her bicycle stands propped against the wall in the hallway, completely forgotten and untouched now for months. At this point, all thoughts of losing weight have utterly evaporated, and all that she cares about is satisfying her appetites for junk food and junk television. One day, she suddenly shakes her head and looks down at herself in horror, as if seeing herself for the first time. What the? she says in disbelief. She drops her half-eaten carton of ice cream and grabs at her fleshy middle with her hands, as if to make sure that it's all her and not some kind of crazy dream. Her hands sink deep into her new flesh, and she realizes to her shock that indeed she has eaten herself into morbid obesity. How is this possible? I can't be this big. I was only... Her words trail off as the sound of an organ sting from the soap opera on TV diverts her attention. Within seconds, her eyes have glazed over, and her hands move to pick up the dropped carton of ice cream. Her worries about her growing size forgotten, she's now only concerned with watching until the next commercial break. It might seem unbelievable that someone could undergo such a startling physical and mental transformation, but what that young woman experienced has led to her being classified by the Foundation as SCP-611. SCP-611 is, as you might have expected, a young woman currently weighing approximately 500 pounds. Her mobility is limited due to her weight, although SCP staff encourage her to take light exercise whenever possible, in hopes of preventing her mobility from deteriorating further. She also suffers from several health issues related to her weight and lifestyle, including diabetes, for which she is receiving treatment by Foundation personnel. Her awareness of her situation and surroundings is severely limited, as she spends most of her time in a stupor, but when she is lucid, she believes that she is in a special facility receiving treatment for her weight problem. In reality, SCP-611 is under observation because of SCP-611-1. SCP-611-1 is a mass of sentient fat located on SCP-611's left side. SCP-611-1 has become integrated with several of SCP-611's vital organs, making it too dangerous to attempt to remove SCP-611-1 via liposuction or other means. SCP-611-1 has gradually exerted increasing control over the mind and actions of its host, to the point that SCP-611 is only fully conscious for 1 to 2 hours daily. The rest of the time, SCP-611-1 is fully in control of its host's behavior. Prior to coming to the SCP facility, SCP-611-1 influenced its host to consume massive amounts of calories, leading to the mysterious and sudden weight gain that we observed earlier. This was possibly an attempt by SCP-611-1 to increase its own size and influence, but as of yet, its reasons, as well as how it exerts control over its host, are unknown. When in control, SCP-611-1 can speak through its host, communicating in standard American English. SCP-611's access to food has been limited since her arrival at the Foundation, so as to prevent her weight gain from accelerating to dangerous levels. Other than eating, SCP-611-1's main interest appears to be daytime television. Attempts to communicate with SCP-611-1 have so far met with little success due to the anomaly's limited attention span for anything other than the minutiae of daytime television. In a conversation with one researcher, however, SCP-611-1 let slip that it preferred daytime television to the programming watched by, quote, that other guy, suggesting that it lived inside a different host before it eventually took up residence within the body of SCP-611. At another point, while in the middle of a conversation about a court drama, SCP-611-1 suddenly announced, kill it now, I don't care if I die." Staff believe that this might not have been SCP-611-1 at all, but rather the voice of SCP-611 trying to break through the hypnotic control of her parasite to call for help. At this time, no drastic action is recommended until further observations can be made. SCP-611-1 does not appear to be contagious, and the way that it bonds with the host is unknown, so it is currently classified as safe. At the moment, SCP-611-1 is the only known instance of its kind. However, considering rising levels of obesity worldwide, it is not unfathomable to think that there could be countless other instances influencing the behavior of other hosts to dedicate their lives to consuming food and television. Who knows? It's not like most of us would need that much convincing.
It's never a nice feeling waking up lying amongst shards of broken glass in the middle of the road. The dawn sky above the biker looks almost peaceful. It's as if nothing had gone wrong at all, as if everything is right in the world. But slowly, the throbbing pain washes into his helmeted head, and the sound of the traffic surrounding him rises in his ears. A sea of onlookers gathers around as the cars blast their horns. Through the cracked visor of his helmet, the biker can see concerned faces, people calling emergency services, and a few women crying. His paramedic bike is toppled on its side about 40 feet from him. There are long black tire marks running up to where it lies, smoking slightly on its side. With a groan, the biker sits himself up and shakes his head.
Bad idea. Looking around, though, it seems he's the only one injured. His bike had gone into the front of a car at the junction. The occupants of the car stand by nervously, offering him whatever little assistance they can. But there's no time for that, the biker suddenly realizes. He looks down at his watch frantically. It's 12:03 p.m. There's not enough time. He rushes over to the bike as fast as he can and lifts it back upright. A couple of onlookers try to grab his arms, trying to sit down to rest, but he can't. There's no time. He has just 3 minutes to get to St. Mary's Hospital in central London. Right now, he's at the junction outside Baker Street Station. He can still make it on time if he gets on his bike and goes now. The biker swings his leg onto the bike and kicks it into life. He takes a deep gulp and looks over his shoulder at the box on the back of his bike. He can't risk opening it here. The damage may already be done. But if the heart is still alive in that box, it is the only chance that a 10-year-old boy has for a normal life. If he doesn't get to the hospital in the next 3 minutes, his life could be over. The school children stand in a circle, looking down at the dead bird with a morbid fascination.
Do you think it's alive? No way.
The boy in the middle of the group goes to pick up a stick. With an air of false confidence, he walks up to the bird and gives it a prod. It makes a squelching noise. The other kids all reel in shock, making retching noises and laughing about it. It's only when their teacher comes out to call them inside that the group disperses, leaving the animal carcass alone, sitting at the edge of the playground, outside the view of boring adults. Each passing day, the kids wander over to the bird's body. It's kind of the best biology lesson they've ever had as they watch the animal slowly decompose. At first, its body just shrinks, goes flat almost. The feathers start falling out, and it loses all of its color. Then it starts to get puffy. Different parts of its flesh bulge out in weird places, as if they're being inflated like a balloon animal at someone's birthday party. But then, the maggots come. There are only a couple of tiny white crawling wrigglers in the bird's body at first, but a couple of days after that, it's infested with them. The creepy crawlies wriggle all over the body. But as the boy looks down at the dead bird, he spots something very peculiar, something they haven't seen in a biology class before. There's a red maggot, wriggling and crawling in amongst the rest of the creepy crawlies. It squirms like the rest of them, but even over the course of the school day, it quickly grows larger than any of the others.
What do you think it is?
The boy stares at it.
It looks like a worm.
And a worm is exactly what it was. The next day, when the kids return, they see that the red maggot is now much larger than any of the others feasting on the bird. With a slightly translucent body, cherry red coloring, and small white speckles on its skin, it looks unlike anything they've ever seen before. Actually, not unlike anything they've ever seen before. It looks exactly like something that all the kids recognize very well. In fact, one of the kids has a bag of them right now that he's chewing on. A candied worm. The kids stare in curiosity, first at the bag of candy that their friend has in his hand, and then down at the worm, slowly eating its way through the decomposing bird. As far as their eyes can tell, the two things are exactly the same, except of course that the one eating the bird seems to be alive. Kids being kids, the next thing that happened was sort of inevitable. One dares the boy to eat it. He almost retches in disgust. There's no way he's even touching it. And then, another one of the children throws down the poison chalice and dares him. The boy stands there nervously. He knows that he's not allowed to eat worms. That had been a lesson ingrained in him from a very young age. But his mother isn't here right now, and this thing doesn't look like any kind of worm that he's seen before. It almost looks a bit tasty. In exchange for eating the worm, another one of the children promises he'll give him 5 English pounds. The kids around the circle gasp. That's a lot of money. None of them have even got 2 pounds on them, let alone 5. Think of all the sweets you could buy with that kind of money. But the boy is adamant. He puffs his chest out, he stands up tall, and he nods firmly. 5 pounds, or he wouldn't do it. After some intense schoolyard debate, the deal is sealed. As the boy lies in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and grumbling, he knows that he's not happy about what his friends have done to him today. He's going to get them back for this. Only he's getting a bit of a tummy ache. Getting is the wrong word. He's had a tummy ache for most of the evening. What he's experiencing now is heartburn. It feels as if something is crawling in his chest. The boy just ignores it. It's probably just his worries about the worm inside of him. He chewed it up pretty well. There's no way that it's still alive in him, surely.
His uneasy sleep is punctuated by rotten dreams. Dreams in which he finds himself lying on the floor and his playground lying on the ground at school, unable to move as people gather around him to poke him with a stick. He feels his skin covered with maggots. They even crawl across the surface of his eyes. In his chest, there's a searing pain. The boy wakes with a start as he feels his heart pounding, thudding against his ribs. It's agonizing. Adrenaline courses through him as he sweats off his face. Crying out for his mom, the boy lies there in bed, feeling the heart attacking his system. When you decide to become a surgeon, you have to accept that you're not going to get very much sleep most nights. In fact, it's more than that. You have to not only accept that you won't get much sleep most nights, but you also have to be at your absolute best when you've had no sleep and it's the middle of the night. With over 40 years under his belt, the surgeon doesn't need coffee anymore, even when the junior doctor offers it to him as he strides toward the operating theater. Instead, he asks them to fill him in on the situation. Who's his patient? What's going on? What needs to be done? The doctor accompanying him reads the notes in a calm but hurried voice. They haven't got much time on this one at all. At any moment, the boy's heart could give out. The surgeon asks what's wrong with the organ, and the doctor looks at his notes in apparent confusion. Apparently, over the course of the night, the boy has suffered a 72% reduction in the mass of his heart. The surgeon stops just on the other side of the door. He doesn't want to have this conversation in front of his whole team. He whispers to the doctor in a terse voice,
What kind of infection does this boy have that his heart has undergone that rapid of a deterioration? It's not an infection at all, sir. Well, sir, it's a worm.
The doctor holds out a sheet to him. The surgeon takes it from him. He looks down at the x-ray to see a scan of the boy's chest cavity. It doesn't look so bad. There's a hole in the heart for sure, but the surgeon has encountered worse in his career.
This was taken when the boy was first admitted.
The doctor hands the surgeon a second x-ray.
And this was taken just 1 hour later.
It is barely recognizable as a human heart. There seems to be a mass growing in the cavity that was left by the heart, and there, infecting all of the boy's organs, was the shape of a worm. The biker weaves his way through the traffic down on Marylebone Road, eyes darting frantically in all directions. He may have a concussion, and he may not be allowed to drive at all right now. In fact, he knows he definitely isn't. But he is under strict instructions. This heart needs to get to St. Mary's Hospital before it's too late. The bike careens around the corner and skids to a halt outside the emergency doors. An ambulance team in front of him is trying to help an old lady out of the back of their vehicle, but the biker doesn't have time for them. He grabs the organ box from the back of the bike and races into the building. It takes all of his remaining concentration to navigate through the maze of hospital corridors on his way to the operating theater. On a better day, he'd be able to do this with no problem, but with his head injury, he can see the lights starting to blur all around him. Ward 6, Ward 7, Ward 7A, Ward 7B. He runs as fast as his heavy boots will allow him, feeling that energy draining from his system. He can't look at his watch. He can't check the time. He just has to find this boy. Operating theater, there, right up ahead of him, just a couple of 100 feet. There's a doctor waiting outside the door who looks up at the sound of his footsteps. The biker rips his helmet off and holds out the box with the heart in it, panting heavily. It's the moment of truth. Is he too late? The doctor looks shell-shocked, not at the biker's arrival, but clearly at something else she's just seen. The man starts to explain, but runs out of words, and instead beckons the biker to follow him into the observation room. There, the two of them stand looking through the glass at the little boy lying on the operating table with the surgeon standing over him. There's something in the air. The biker sniffs, confused.
Can anyone else smell sugar?
Next time you open a packet of candied worms, take a second to look through the little creepy crawlies in the bag. Perhaps poke a couple of them, just to see if any of them are moving. You can never be too careful. If you had told the parents of that young boy on the night when their son woke up with heart palpitations, telling stories of eating a worm at school, that the only health concerns he would have going forward were mild diabetes and a slightly raised level of blood sugar, I'm sure they would have been thrilled to hear it. You see, SCP-839, commonly referred to within the Foundation as candied worms, is much scarier on the surface than it is underneath. Not only does this SCP resemble your usual candy worm, but its body is actually composed of sugar flavorings and colorings, roughly equivalent to what you would find in most convenience store candy aisles. Each instance even has a small raised bit of writing near the tail specifying which flavor it is. While the origins of these worms are yet to be determined, cases have sprung up across much of the Western world, with higher numbers reported in areas with higher levels of diabetes. There seems to be a parallel between high-sugar diets and the presence of SCP-839. Whether they are of man-made or other origins is yet to be determined. That is not to say that SCP-839 cannot survive outside of human populations. This SCP in the wild primarily feeds on decomposing organic matter and is capable of sustaining itself on a purely vegetarian diet. However, when ingested into the human body, SCP-839 will target specific organs and burrow its way towards them. The organ in question depends on which color Candied worm the SCP instance is. For example, the red cherry-flavored Candied worms will burrow towards the heart and consume that, while the blue raspberry ones will instead feed on the human's kidney. One would expect the health consequences of this feeding to be severe. However, as the SCP feeds, it will also change its own shape and chemical composition until the worm itself becomes a substitute organ for the one that it is consuming. However, this substitute organ is not a perfect replacement, as other health consequences are derived from its presence. For example, the green apple-flavored SCP-839-3 targets the eye and replaces it with a jelly-green version of the human eye. While this eye is mostly capable of sight, subjects have reported mild hallucinations and blurriness of vision, as well as a greenish tint to how they see the world. Fortunately for the Foundation, SCP-839 reproduces sexually, meaning that individual instances require a partner in order to have offspring. This has made containment of this SCP much more feasible. Though they are a relatively low-priority entity in the broader scope of the Foundation, there are no known cases as of yet of any SCP-839 infections leading to death or serious chronic illness. Therefore, any instances that are captured by the Foundation are sent to Storage Site 839-1, where they are kept in a glass housing and regularly fed a diet of plant matter each day. Here, their reproductive activity can be closely monitored and controlled based on what research is needed. Those infected with SCP-839 instances can continue to live long and healthy lives, with only minor health complications arising. Therefore, the Foundation is comfortable allowing a reasonable number of cases to go unexamined in the world. So, like I said, for next time you open up a bag of Candied worms, maybe just give them a quick poke. You could be saving yourself a trip to the hospital and a lifetime dependence on insulin.
A man opens his mouth to bite a hot dog and suddenly freezes. His eyes widen, and the hot dog drops from his hand, falling to the ground. Ahead, a stampede of people is running toward him, screaming, crying out for help. Behind them, a man walks at an ordinary, casual pace, but something is off. His eyes have a glazed, unfocused look to them, and he keeps shoveling random items into his open mouth, swallowing them down. He eats a clipboard and pen, a discarded shoe, and as the first man watches in horror, the very hungry man grabs the ankle of a fallen member of the crowd and pulls him into his mouth, devouring him. The first man turns to run for his life, only to be knocked to the ground by the rest of the crowd, trying to escape. He struggles to climb back to his feet, and a hand reaches out to take his. When he makes it to his feet, he looks up and sees the hungry man pulling him in, mouth stretching open wide. The sky is a perfect, cloudless blue. The air is warm from the unbroken sunlight, but cooled to the perfect temperature by a gentle breeze. And there is a sense of electricity, excitement, and competition in the air. Throngs of people have gathered together in a makeshift arena, piled into plastic chairs and swarming around concession stands, all training their eyes on the arena's center. What are they here for? Some sort of Olympic Games? A baseball tournament? A horse race? No, it's something greater, something meatier. It is the annual Midsummer Hot Dog Eating Contest, and locals and tourists alike are coming together to see just who can cram the most pork or beef hot dogs and buns down their gullets in front of a roaring crowd. The announcer makes his way to the front of the arena, standing with his arms wide in front of the long table behind him. As he calls out the names of this year's contestants, they file in, each taking his place behind the table. There is the previous year's champion, a burly man with a bushy beard and twinkling eyes, and there is this year's surprise competitor, a skinny 19-year-old college student with a hungry grin. Then there are the lesser-known contestants, a local father who signed up after making a joke with his daughter, an uncle who scrawled his name on the sign-up sheet after a few too many drinks, a recently retired man checking off another item on his golden years bucket list. All have come to the event today with full hearts and empty stomachs, ready to see who the year's victor will be. The announcer riles up the crowd, encouraging them to cheer as loudly as possible to spur on their chosen competitor.
All the while, staff are carrying out trays piled high with hot dogs. More hot dogs than most people see in a year, except for the people who just really, really love hot dogs. Each contestant receives a tray of hot dogs, a bucket of water, and an additional empty bucket, just in case, well, you get the idea. With the supplies and competitors all in place, it is time to begin the countdown. The announcer holds up his favorite air horn and calls out,
3, 2, 1, eat!
At the sound of the air horn's blast, the men leap into action, seizing hot dogs from plates and each engaging in their unique competitive eating technique. The previous year's champion employs the method of famous hot dog eating champion Joey Chestnut, dunking his entire hot dog sloppily into his water, then swallowing it as quickly as possible. The new challenger, on the other hand, employs the Solomon method, named for King Solomon. Much like the fabled king suggested doing with a stolen infant, eaters using the Solomon method break the focus of their feasting in half before polishing it off. One of the more casual competitors attempts a divide-and-conquer technique, eating first the dog itself and then the bun. Others employ no specific technique at all, attempting to devour the stack of hot dogs before them, using the same classic eating style they might employ at a family barbecue. This is a grave mistake. One by one, the less prepared competitors drop out, spitting into their buckets, wiping meat sweats from their foreheads, waddling out of the arena while groaning and holding their aching stomachs. Soon, only the two frontrunners remain. But what's this? A challenger approaches. An unassuming black man, clad in a shirt and dress pants, rushes into the arena, his face a mask of single-minded determination, and begins seizing the discarded hot dogs off the table, gobbling them up as fast as he can. The announcer and the rest of the audience watch in stunned disbelief. This is unprecedented, and as exciting as it is, definitely against the rules. This man is not a registered competitor, and he certainly can't join the contest in the champion stretch. Unsure of what else to do, the announcer beckons to the staff on the sidelines, ushering them back toward the table to clear the food and escort this surprise drop-in out of the arena. The audience watches with rapt attention as the staff members attempt to remove the stranger from his place at the table. He shakes his head violently, refusing to go, and snatches the hot dogs away from them, even as they try to clear the trays away. All the while, the remaining competitors standing are attempting to stay the course and finish strong in spite of the interruption. The new, younger man collapses, slumping down onto the table in a hot dog-induced stupor. He has tapped out. The victor is the previous year's champion, with a staggering ultimate tally of 38 hot dogs. As 4 staff members work together to wrestle the stranger out of the arena, the champion steps forward to receive his trophy. The crowd roars as he holds up his arms, grinning ear to ear and basking in yet another win. The announcer can still see the staff struggling with the stranger out of the corner of his eye, but this crowd wants to see their champion crowned, and the show must go on. So he grabs the Hot Dog King sash, the crown made from gold-plated, hot dogs, and even the massive gold trophy. He crowns the winner, placing the sash over his shoulders. Then, as the music swells triumphantly, courtesy of the local high school marching band, the announcer holds up the trophy, sunlight glinting off its shiny surface. It represents so many things: achievement, celebration, the ability to eat just so much meat and not get sick, and now it is time for it to be awarded to the man who earned it. The announcer stretches his arms, handing over the trophy to the contest winner, when all of a sudden, another hand grabs hold of its handle, ripping it from the announcer's grasp. The stranger has returned, somehow freeing himself from the multiple security guards who escorted him away, and he has taken the trophy for himself. But he isn't just attempting to crown himself the Hot Dog King. No, this is not a simple coup de hot dog. He lifts the trophy up over his head, opening his mouth as wide as it will go, and tears the metal in half with a horrible screeching sound, shoving the pieces into his mouth, chewing and swallowing. By the time the announcer and the champion recover from their shock enough to move again, the trophy is completely gone, vanished into the stranger's belly. After a day of seemingly impossible feats of feasting, the sight of this strange man consuming a truly impossible meal of metal is just too much for the already anxious crowd to take. The arena erupts into absolute chaos as people spill out of their seats en masse, fleeing the area. The champion, however, does not turn and run. He feels robbed of his victory. Though it may have occurred in an utterly bizarre fashion, he won't stand for this kind of disrespect. He has trained all year for this moment, only to watch his trophy be eaten right in front of him. He marches right up to the stranger and pokes him in the chest, demanding to know who he thinks he is. What gives him the right to crash the hot dog eating contest, interrupt the proceedings, and upstage his victory by chowing down on the trophy?
The man doesn't answer him, so the champion continues to berate him, wagging his finger in his face. The stranger's eyes follow the finger, and slowly he opens his mouth. There is a sudden chomp, and the champion screams, holding his hand to his chest, using his shirt to stem the bleeding. He turns to run with the rest of the crowd, but it's too late. The stranger's hand clamps down on his shoulder, holding him in place with a surprising strength. The only thing he sees before his life is snuffed out is the stranger's wide-open mouth, before everything goes dark with another sickening chomp. All the while, the crowd's terror rises to a fever pitch at the horrible sight. They trample each other as they scramble to vacate the area, shoving strangers and loved ones alike out of the way in a bid to escape this mysterious equal-opportunity omnivore with an appetite for far more than just hot dogs. Some manage to escape, running far enough from the arena that they can stop to catch their breaths and glance back at the ones who were not so lucky. Those who tripped and fell in the madness, who had the wind knocked out of them by an elbow to the gut from one of their neighbors, those with weak ankles or who hadn't tied their shoes carefully enough. All of these poor, unfortunate souls are next on the menu for the stranger. He devours them one by one, rarely even stopping to chew. As one surviving woman watching from a distance pulls out her phone to call 911, she can't escape noticing the parallels to the contest itself, the way the stranger eats with a singular focus on consuming as much as possible. There's no pause to enjoy the meal, but there is no sadism or malice in the act either, just the sheer, undeniable drive to keep eating. The woman's call to the police is one of the strangest moments of her life and utterly baffles the local police department. "Ma'am, please calm down," one officer repeats again and again. "What do you mean there's a man eating people?"
I mean exactly what I said, she shouts. A man showed up at the hot dog contest and started eating people. Please, you have to do something.
"I think this is above our pay grade, miss," another officer chimes in. "You think we should call, the first officer trails off. Who? The woman demands, but the line goes dead before she can ask another question. The police are clearly no help, and she isn't about to stick around and see just how big this stranger's appetite is. She tried to save the others, but now she needs to save herself. She runs all the way home without another glance back. Meanwhile, the local police did make that mysterious call, and an SCP Foundation mobile task force is currently en route to the scene. By the time they arrive, the park is a ghost town, with nothing but the blood-stained grass and abandoned arena to suggest that something horrible ever happened here at all. But these aren't some bumbling local police officers who have no idea what to do with a man-eating anomaly. This team has seen enough bizarre sights to fill a lifetime, and another lifetime after that. They spy a trail of sticky red footprints leading away from the arena. At first, they assume that the substance is blood, but a closer examination reveals that it is, in fact, ketchup. They track the savory footprints away from the scene of the day's unsavory events, following them to a nearby warehouse. Judging from the scattered wooden beams, rustling metal, and boarded-up windows, this place has been abandoned for some time. The perfect place for an anomaly to hide away. If they weren't certain, the sound of someone inside biting through sheets of metal is plenty of indication that this is the right place. With no time to waste, they break down the door of the warehouse, weapons drawn and ready. They follow the sound of the chewing, splitting up to apprehend the subject from all available directions. The shriek of tearing metal echoes through the building, bouncing off the walls and creating a cacophony that is difficult to track. They do their best to follow the sound, but quickly veer off in separate directions in an attempt to cover as much ground as possible. One operative confronts the stranger just as he is reaching for another piece of metal. He watches as the man takes a massive bite out of the steel, a bite that should have shattered his teeth and broken his jaw. Instead, a cartoonish bite mark is taken out of the metal. He approaches the stranger, who, upon locking eyes with him, begins to shake his head, still chewing. The MTF operative ignores this visual cue, approaching the man and attempting to physically restrain him. This, like the confrontation with the champion before, is cut off with a fateful chomp, and the operative screams ringing out through the warehouse, alerting his teammates to his unfortunate fate. The screams suddenly go silent, and another MTF operative stops cold, listening as the sound of chewing draws nearer and nearer. He spins around to face the presence behind him and spots the stranger standing there. The otherwise ordinary man is polishing off the tip of a steel beam, grimacing as he swallows it. The operative lifts his weapon, pointing it at the subject. The operative tells him to stand down and come quietly. The hungry man pleads, wide-eyed, for the operative to turn and run while he still can. He takes small, reluctant steps toward the operative, muttering that he can't stop. The operative brandishes his weapon again, barking another order for the man to stop. Before he can make another move, the stranger snatches the weapon out of his hand, opens his mouth, and swallows it. He winces as he does, but does not stop until the weapon is completely devoured. All at once, he lets out a loud belch, his knees buckle, and he slumps to the ground. He rubs his stomach, wipes his brow, and sighs heavily. "I'm so sorry about that. I was just so hungry I couldn't help it." The man shakes his head sadly. "I hope you can get a new weapon. And I'm sorry about your friend, too." "You said you couldn't help it. Why'd you stop?" The stranger shrugs, sighs again, and simply says, "Well, because I was full." After a bit of convincing, and a test confirming that the subject's strength and bite force has returned to ordinary human levels, the remaining mobile task force agreed to bring him into Foundation custody unharmed, though restrained. They pile into one of the SCP Foundation's trademark unmarked vans and set off toward the nearest Foundation site. About 1 hour into the trip, the subject begins to lament his growling stomach, asking if they could possibly stop somewhere for a bite to eat. Ordinarily, this is against protocol, but after what happened to their teammate, the task force members aren't taking any chances. They pull into a fast food drive-thru and permit the subject to order whatever he wants. They'll declare it as a business expense later. 5 burgers, 5 fries, 5 tacos, 5 pies, 5 cokes, 10 tater tots, 10 tenders, 5 shakes, 5 pancakes, 5 jalapeno poppers, and 5 baked potatoes later, the task force successfully reached the Foundation site with their newest subject, SCP-913. SCP-913 appears to be an average African-American man around middle age. Though his appearance is completely ordinary, his metabolism is unnaturally fast. He requires the recommended daily caloric intake for an average human being every 2 hours and has an unusually high internal temperature, though the specific number has been redacted from his official file. If he does not meet his calorie requirement for a given 2-hour period, he will enter a trance state in which he is unable to control himself. In this state, he will break down and ingest any solid matter in his line of sight. This includes matter that would ordinarily be indigestible, including wood, plastic, and metal. In this state, his appetite does not distinguish between living and non-living subjects. When he is in this hunger-driven state, he is aware of all his actions, but cannot stop himself, even when he eats dense materials that cause him extreme discomfort. If this state hits while the subject is sleeping, he will be forced awake. In addition to his anomalous appetite, SCP-913 can rend objects at an estimated force of 3,000 newtons and can bite objects with an estimated force of 5,000 newtons when eating them. Whenever he is not in his trance state, he cannot replicate this strength. An examination of SCP-913's liver tissue showed that it is capable of producing new enzymes in response to foreign material, allowing his body to digest matter that should be highly dangerous to consume. These enzymes metabolize the substrate at an efficiency of approximately 98%, detoxifying any drugs or toxins consumed by the subject during the hunger state or otherwise. This includes, but is not limited to, amnestics and anesthetics. When SCP-913 was first discovered, he was wearing a shirt and dress pants, both with the brand name Doctor's Orders sewn onto their tags. SCP-913 has no tattoos aside from one on his right calf, which reads, Mr. Hungry, from Little Misters by Dr. Wondertainment. Just in case you aren't aware, the Little Misters are a line of humanoid anomalies created by the mysterious Dr. Wondertainment Corporation, including the fish-headed Mr. Fish, the candy-coated Ms. Sweetie, and Mr. Life and Mr. Death, who is every bit as existentially upsetting as he sounds. The purpose of these creations is currently unknown, though, like many Dr. Wondertainment products, their existence invites endless speculation. SCP-913 must be contained in a customized humanoid containment cell lined with 1-meter-thick carbon steel. 913 is to be provided standard furnishings for his containment cell, coinciding with the usual necessities for a comfortable humanoid dwelling. He may be given pre-recorded entertainment materials, such as concerts, films, and television shows upon request. The cell may be accessed via a reinforced carbon steel door. Once every 2 hours, SCP-913 is provided with one nutritional supplement as specified in Document 913-2. I attempted to locate a copy of 913-2 for further details on said nutritional supplement, but access to it appears to be limited to researchers assigned to SCP-913. While the subject is sleeping, nutrition is provided to SCP-913 via a central venous catheter that must be changed once every 3 months. These measures allow SCP-913 to receive the calories that he needs to avoid entering a hunger state, ensuring the safety of everyone on site, as well as his own comfort. Like the rest of the Little Misters, SCP-913 presents a puzzle that may never be solved.
I could spend my limited time on this earth wondering why Dr. Wondertainment would create a being that seems to serve no purpose other than eating as much as possible, lest he unwillingly destroy the environment around him. But I believe that would be a waste of time. Why does Dr. Wondertainment do anything that they do? Why create a woman who can turn men into candy soldiers? Why create an ordinary man with a fish head, a tiny top hat, and a Boston accent? The personal motivations of Dr. Wondertainment, whether they are an individual or a massive conglomerate, are as inscrutable to me as the meaning of life itself, or the reasons why a person would want to eat more than 2 hot dogs in one sitting. A body twists and turns into unimaginable shapes. Eyes glow in the dark. Shadowy entities appear around you, mimicking your every move. Would you like a stick of gum? In a small seaside town nestled just along the coast of New England, and at least an hour's drive away from any major city, there isn't much to do but brave the chilly ocean waters, crowd onto the rocky beach, or walk along the boardwalk. For most of the residents of this quaint little town, the choice is clear. Years ago, when the town was at the height of its success as a tourist destination, visitors would flock from all over the country, descending on the boardwalk like the seagulls that swarm around the food stands in search of an errant French fry. In its heyday, the boardwalk boasted a small amusement park with a roller coaster and a Ferris wheel, an arcade with the latest in 1980s video game technology, several stands selling hot dogs and crispy French fries coated in grease and salt, and the pride and joy of many a local, a classic, old-fashioned candy store. Today, the arcade is all but empty, with 1 or 2 players occasionally wandering in to try their hand at the now vintage attractions inside. The amusement park is still standing, but the rides have faded and chipped. The stands still sell their wares, but the lines are shorter than they once were. And at the center of it all, the beloved candy shop is struggling to hold on. The price of waterfront property has climbed, while tourism has dwindled. And with online shopping taking over the market, well, the candy shop's owner can scarcely scrape enough money together to keep the roof over his head. On this particular day, the shop owner is restocking his shelves, the door propped open to let in just enough of the crisp, salty ocean breeze to keep his head clear and his spirits up. It's getting harder and harder to maintain the cheerful demeanor he's known for, to step into his red and white striped suit every day and smile for the few tourists who poke their heads into the shop. But still, he keeps at it. He loves this little store, and he'll keep holding on to it until there's nothing left to hold. He fills glass containers with colorful little hard candies, slides boxes of saltwater taffy onto shelves, and places blocks of fudge in the glass case by the cash register. All the while, he takes a little sample of each product for himself. A candy here, a small square of fudge there, to keep his energy up. Besides, he would never sell a product he didn't taste test first, only the best for his customers, though they were few and far between these days. Especially this time of year, as the air grows colder and the days get shorter, sunshine becomes a limited commodity as the summer turns to autumn. So it comes as quite a surprise to the older man when he hears a knock at the shop door. He turns and sees a delivery man standing there with a stack of packages. This is especially odd, as he can't recall ordering anything. But the delivery man explains that these packages are product samples from an up-and-coming candy company, one specializing in novelty chewing gum. They are providing samples to a variety of small candy businesses, as well as larger retail outlets, in order to conduct market research. These particular flavors, the delivery man promises, cannot be found anywhere else. Well, the promise of a new, exclusive product to draw new customers in is more than a little bit exciting for the shopkeeper. Without a second thought, he signs for the packages and carries them inside. The shop has carried a few varieties of chewing gum over the years: mint, cinnamon, fruit, and even prank gum that turns a person's tongue black when they chew it. What could possibly be so unique about this gum? He's determined to find out. As he cuts open the boxes, the shopkeeper is greeted with brightly colored packaging that looks, for the most part, like any other gum packaging out there. He does quickly notice one unusual difference, though: the flavor names. Each of them begins with the phrase, "tastes like," which is a clever enough branding choice, but the flavors themselves are odd. He lifts the first packet and reads its label, brow furrowing in confusion. Tastes like youth. What could that possibly mean? For a novelty candy, this gum sure is especially novel. Well, he never stocks a product without trying it out for himself first, so he unwraps a piece of the bright pink gum and pops it into his mouth. The first thing that he notices is the taste. An overwhelming sweetness tinged with nostalgia. It tastes like cotton candy, but not just any cotton candy, It tastes like the cotton candy he once enjoyed as a little boy on this very boardwalk, a flavor he hasn't experienced in 60 years. The next thing that he notices is that his eyes are aching all of a sudden. He takes off his glasses for a moment and is shocked by what he sees. Everything, clearly, without the aid of the lenses. His vision is like it was when he was a young man, before age had blurred the edges of everything in his line of sight. His joints have stopped aching, and he feels a sudden surge of energy, the sudden urge to run, to jump, to click his heels together. He rushes to the bathroom mirror, half expecting to see his younger face staring back at him. No, he still looks the same, but he feels decades younger. His mind reels, and he can't think of anything to do but laugh. This gum. It should be impossible, but this piece really does taste like youth. This might just be the product that saves the store. The invigorating effect lasts, all in all, for about a half hour. But during that half hour, the shopkeeper feels more optimistic than he has in many, many years, and the feeling lingers even after the gum's effects subside. But what other flavors did he receive? The delivery man brought 3 boxes, so what about the other 2? He opens the second box and pulls out a pack. Tastes like Mom used to make. Well, that's even more vague than the first one. But after the experience of the previous one, he's eager to discover exactly what that could mean. He unwraps a piece, studies its light brown color, and pops it into his mouth. As soon as he begins to chew, the flavor explodes on his tongue, taking him back once again to his childhood. Brown butter, sugar, chocolate chips, a hint of vanilla. It can't be. But it is. It's his mother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. How could the manufacturers have possibly recreated it so perfectly? The flavor passes quickly, and, eager to confirm his experience and make sure it was real, he grabs another piece. This one tastes entirely different. Blueberry pancakes, like his mother used to make on Sunday mornings, dripping with syrup and melted butter. This is the most unusual chewing gum indeed. In all his years of selling candy, of tasting every unusual innovation or novelty product, he never dreamed it could be like this. Now for the third package. He slices the box open and finds black packages inside, emblazoned with eerie red writing. The text read, "Tastes like your worst nightmare." The shopkeeper feels a chill run down his spine, his hands shaking with nerves as he unwraps a piece of the pitch-black gum. But he can't stop himself. He has to satisfy his curiosity to discover what nightmares taste like. He pops the piece into his mouth and begins to chew. At first, he's almost disappointed. It doesn't taste like much of anything. Vaguely sweet, almost creamy, like finishing a glass of warm milk before bed. But as he chews, the shop around him begins to blur and warp, lights dimming until he is standing in the dark. The hairs on his arms stand to attention, and he becomes overwhelmed with the sensation of eyes on his back. Something's here, and it's watching him. He spins around and finds nothing there. But wait, what's that? Out of the corner of his eye, a shadow darting just out of sight into the storage room in the back. Against his will, his feet begin to carry the man toward that room, following the shadow. But the door to the storeroom is shut. It wasn't shut before. Something closed it when it darted inside, and it's in there now, waiting for him. His stomach turns as his hand reaches for the doorknob, turning it inch by inch. His nerves are screaming at him to stop, to turn and run. But as if trapped in a nightmare, his body refuses to obey him. It pushes the door open with a pronounced creak, and there, in the darkness, 2 glowing red eyes gaze out at him. The shopkeeper's heart leaps into his throat, and in a moment of clarity, he spits out the gum. All at once, the glowing eyes are gone. The lights have come back on, and the nightmare is over. He resolves not to stock that particular flavor in the shop, and tucks the box away in the back of that same storage room. Before long, his 2 new nostalgic flavors of magic chewing gum draw the attention of the SCP Foundation, who, after paying the man enough money to keep the shop open for the foreseeable future, call it a finder's fee, take the gum samples into custody and give them the classification SCP-1200. The designation SCP-1200 applies to all instances of chewing gum distributed under the brand Tastes Like Chewing Gum. Packages of this gum have been spotted in various grocery and convenience stores around the United States, appearing seemingly at random. Each pack of gum features a logo identifying the manufacturer as simply the factory. Whenever a human subject masticates or chews a piece of the gum, a certain anomalous effect will occur. This effect varies depending on the color and flavor of the given gum. There have currently been 83 flavors of SCP-1200 identified and cataloged. Swallowing this gum does not appear to produce any additional anomalous effects. Also, contrary to what certain popular misinformation might say, this gum, or any gum in fact, does not stay in the digestive tract for 7 years. The 83 flavors on file can be found in SCP-1200-EKV, which was unfortunately impossible for me to obtain during my research into SCP-1200. The official file does, however, include a partial list of some of these flavors. Though I would have preferred to conduct a more comprehensive review, this at least provides a bit of valuable additional context for the anomalous product. So let's review some of the most memorable SCP-1200 flavors and their recorded effects on human test subjects. SCP-1200-12 is a lime green-colored gum flavor, which is, funnily enough, called tastes like lemons. When a human subject chews this flavor, their gustatory perception is altered for the next 28 hours. No matter what they eat during that time frame, it will taste like lemons. A bit odd, but not harmful, unless the subject just really hates the taste of lemon. After the 28-hour period is up, all food reverts to its original taste. SCP-1200-15 is a bright yellow flavor, tastes like sunshine. When a test subject eats this flavor, they will become luminescent, emitting over 40,000 lux of white light. This effect, while disconcerting to witness, does not do any harm to the subject exhibiting it. The subject's luminescence lasts for approximately 20 minutes at full intensity, and then the light begins to dim gradually until it disappears completely after 4 more minutes. You may have noticed that this flavor is a great deal more abstract than tastes like lemons. Well, they only get more unusual from here. The next flavor detailed in the file for SCP-1200 is SCP-1200-29, tastes like Rubik's Cube. Like the cube for which it's named, this flavor is multicolored, checkered in white, orange, green, red, yellow, and blue. When a subject eats this flavor, their body takes on a unique property for the next 216 minutes. During this window of time, the subject will be able to rearrange segments of their body, both internal and external, at will. This has no impact on the subject's health or comfort, even when rearranging bones, muscles, and vital organs. However, these alterations cause secondary changes within the body as it compensates for the movements. Unfortunately, this means that the first test subject to consume this flavor during SCP Foundation trials was unable to return her body to its original orientation before the 216 minutes were up. She failed to solve the puzzle, and now her left and right hands are permanently swapped. The next flavor included in the file is SCP-1200-30, a dark blue gum that is described as tastes like those forgotten. What could that possibly mean? Well, it means that once a test subject has chewed this flavor, 6 corporeal humanoid entities will manifest in their vicinity. These entities do not appear to be sentient, and their only behavior is mimicking the actions and speech of the subject and any other humans in the area, such as guards and researchers. These entities linger for 6 days before disappearing, leaving a homogeneous liquid behind. Analysis of the liquid determined that it consisted of a mixture of organic materials, iron particles, and acrylic paint. SCP-1200-58 is a particularly curious flavor. This white gum tastes like afterlife. When the subject chews it, a polyhedral crystalline exoskeleton forms around them. Once it is formed, it will levitate 1.3 meters off of the ground. During the first trial, this object remained inert for a period of 62 days. When the 62 days were up, the exoskeleton broke apart, leaving the subject behind and completely unharmed. He was immediately interviewed about his experience inside the structure, and he described being transported to a green meadow, where he met his younger brother. This was especially curious considering that the subject does not have any recorded siblings, living or dead. Another notable aspect of this flavor is its effect's resemblance to SCP-1511, crystalline structures that transfer prisoners while showing them some manner of beautiful, false afterlife. The only other flavor included in the file is Tastes Like Moon's Shadow, a red gum that has been tested once on a female research subject. After she finished chewing the piece of gum, a series of incorporeal, translucent, leporine organisms began to emerge from the walls of the cell where the subject was being kept. During this entire process, the subject claimed to not see the entities, nor did she feel it when they approached her, reached her, and burrowed into her body. Video recordings of the incident were unable to capture these entities. 11 days after the experiment was conducted, the subject was found dead. Despite the lack of visible injuries, her cause of death was determined to be exsanguination. This is the only recorded fatality resulting from a sample of SCP-1200. There appears to be a link between this gum flavor and SCP-1284, though I have not yet been able to determine the nature of this link. On February 20th, 2003, the SCP Foundation was conducting an investigation completely unrelated to SCP-1200. The exact nature of this original investigation has been redacted from the file, but whatever it was, it's irrelevant to the subject at hand. It isn't the investigation, but what they discovered by complete accident that matters. Foundation operatives stumbled upon a secretive facility that was entirely dedicated to the production of tastes like those forgotten. When the Foundation entered the facility, they discovered an assembly line, as well as 28 anomalous entities dwelling inside. It would appear that these entities, referred to as SCP-1200-A, are part of the company's workforce. Instances of SCP-1200-A are animate humanoid entities whose physiology is composed primarily of wrought iron. They are also coated in several layers of paint, usually in a shade of white, pale blue, or yellow. These layers of paint are worn, faded, and flaking, and the metal beneath is beginning to rust. Whenever they were made, it was some time ago, and they have fallen into a state of disrepair. Each instance has no facial features on its head, and the only feature present is one large, circular opening, which seems to operate a bit like a mouth. In addition to discovering the facility and its anomalous workers, this discovery gave the Foundation some new insight into the production process for this particular flavor of tastes like chewing gum. The image that it painted was, well, troubling. When instances of SCP-1200-A are not contained, they will attempt to collect recently deceased human cadavers and transport them to the production facility. If they are permitted to do so, they will collect these bodies from freshly dug graves or even poorly guarded morgues and carry them back to the facility. There, an SCP-1200-A instance will take one of its chosen corpses and begin to regurgitate paint, biological matter, and small slags of iron into the body's mouth. I apologize for the stomach-turning imagery, but there is simply no pleasant way to describe this process. The instance will repeat this process over a period of several weeks until the body begins to liquefy under the influence of whatever matter the entity has pumped into it. The process only ceases when the body begins to liquefy, eventually leaving behind nothing but a thick, homogeneous liquid, which will suddenly disappear soon after. How it disappears and where it goes is unknown, but I can make an unpleasant guess. Chemical analysis of some of this liquid has identified it as the substance that makes up 80% of the sample of tastes like those forgotten. It would appear that this particular flavor of chewing gum and Soylent Green have a key ingredient in common: people. No other facilities have been discovered at this point, so it is uncertain whether the key ingredients in other gum flavors are quite as macabre. Following the discovery of this facility, the Foundation cross-referenced its communication archives for any potential mentions of the facility or facilities like it. This investigation uncovered a surprisingly relevant phone call hidden in the archives. The call was made on June 2, 1999, from a payphone about 2 kilometers from the facility discovered in 2003. The recording contains one single unidentified male voice, and a transcription of the call's contents is included.
Herrick, this is Davis. I'm all done with the psychopomps here. We redirected the output to the location you wanted. Weren't any problems there. The goo should start arriving to you shortly. About your other order, Morton spotted some nano hives in Budapest. I'm heading out there tomorrow. They should do nicely for your task after some tinkering. Make sure there won't be any issues with my payment this time. If your contacts at the factory are unwilling, I can always find someone else. Call you in 2 weeks.
Any discovery and seizure of SCP-1200 instances must be performed by the FDA under CFR Title 21. Once the instances are in the possession of the FDA, these samples will be replaced with non-anomalous duplicates, and the originals are to be transferred to Foundation Site 197. SCP-1200-A instances do not require food or oxygen to survive, and therefore are to be kept contained in individual reinforced containers, which are stored in the I-TL1 wing of Site-197. 2 days after the SCP-1200-A base facility was dismantled, the SCP Foundation received a series of packages. These packages were delivered to several facilities, and all contained the same thing, a new, previously undocumented flavor of gum. This gum was completely colorless, and the packaging read, "Tastes like normalcy." Test subjects who chewed the gum said that it had no noticeable flavor at all, and no anomalous effects occurred. It seems that the creators of Tastes Like Chewing Gum took notice of the Foundation's investigation and decided to create a custom flavor, or lack thereof, for the organization. The identity of the company's higher-ups, or the gum's creators, is still unknown. Unfortunately, the trail has gone cold for now. But don't lose hope. It's possible more facilities are out there, waiting to be discovered. Keep that dream alive, investigators, and don't let me burst your bubble. Get it? Like bubblegum? Well, there's a reason I became a researcher and not a comedian.
These winters are getting worse every year, that's for sure. The old cattle rancher doesn't know if it's the climate changing, God's judgment arriving, or if he's just getting older and struggling to keep up. Probably a strong mix of all of it. Whatever the cause, it doesn't change the facts. It's deathly cold out there. His ailing, elderly ma's health continues to deteriorate. He hasn't heard from his delivery driver Jorge in days, and on top of it all, his loyal dog Maribel is out there barking into the darkness of the barn. The rancher heads out to fetch her. He doesn't know what he'd do if she froze. He whistles, but she doesn't look back at him. She just carries on barking up that road into the snowy night. The rancher wades through the snow and peers in the direction she's looking. "There's nothing there, girl. Get inside." But Maribel keeps barking. She's insisting. He looks again. Is that? The rancher takes off running up the road. All thoughts of cold immediately gone from his mind, he races towards the figure as fast as he can. His frozen fingers fumble at the zipper on his parka. Icy wind stabs the insides of his lungs. Maribel shoots off ahead of him. There, he pulls the zipper down and wrestles the thick coat off of his shoulders just as he reaches the tiny figure. He drops to his knees and throws the coat over the shoulders of the little girl standing alone in the snow. Quick as he can, he wraps it tightly around her, pulling the hood up and over her head. He takes her tiny shoulders in his hands and gives her a shake. "You okay? Hello? Can you hear me?" The girl sways for a moment, then collapses. He catches her, and in one deft motion, scoops her into his arms and takes off back down the road in the direction of his farm. Where the hell had she come from? There are no buildings around here for miles. No one uses that road except Jorge. And in this weather, she couldn't have walked all the way over those mountains. She'd have frozen solid. He bites the finger of a glove and pulls it off. With his bare hand, he clasps one of hers. By the feel of her skin, she pretty much is frozen solid already. He needs to get her warmed up, now. He kicks open the front door and bundles inside with a flurry of snowflakes and an anxious dog at his heels. The fire's not quite dead yet, so he rushes over to the hearth and lays the little girl down next to it. He can barely see her at all wrapped up in his enormous coat. She doesn't seem to be moving. "Ma, I'm home. I found someone." The rancher grabs 2 dry logs from the side and throws them onto the fire. He piles kindling high on top of them and blows steadily into the embers at the bottom. They glow and swell in size. No taking yet. He blows again for longer, and again. He feels his head starting to swim. A crackle, a lick of flame. It's taken. Panting, he turns back to the bundled-up coat on the floor with the child inside. Still no movement. A sickening knot tightens his stomach. What if she's... No, don't let yourself think that. Not yet. He reaches down and gently undoes the zipper on the parka. His trembling fingers push back the hood. She's pale, deathly pale. Her dark brown hair is wet and clings to her scalp. The tips are frozen. At a guess, she must only be 9 years old. Eyes closed, lips a sickening blue. But that's not the color that scares him the most. On her neck, there's red. Delicately as he can, the rancher takes the coat off her shoulders and hangs it up by the fire. She's dressed only in a plaid shirt, way too big for her. It looks like an adult's shirt, similar to an old one he used to have years ago. But on her neck, her hands, her feet, is that same deep red, layers of blood frozen to her skin. He sits back, his mind blank. He's seen that much blood before. Sure he has. When you work with cattle, it's an unfortunate part of the job. He's seen cows bleed out during childbirth. The girl in front of him? She's the same color as those orphaned calves that lie crying on the floor. A groaning sound fills the room. The rancher looks across at the armchair where his ma sits. She doesn't look at him, doesn't look at the girl on the floor. She just stares into the fire, same way she always does. Ma groans again, trying to express something she doesn't understand, being in a world without living in it.
Ma, it's okay. Sorry if I startled you. We have a guest with us.
But she just keeps on groaning and staring into the fire. The rancher buries his head in his hands and lets out a deep breath. Only the sound of his breath is joined by another, a tiny breath rattling and rasping through a damaged child's throat, trying its best to keep its host alive. The rancher opens his eyes and stares at the child. She isn't conscious, not by a long shot, but she's breathing, a little at a time. The icicles in her hair have turned into rounded droplets of water that glow by the heat of the fire. He snaps back to his senses. He's not doing her much if she's just lying there soaking wet. He runs off upstairs and grabs some towels and a fresh flannel shirt to wear. After several minutes of drying her off, he's confident enough that he's got most of the water off. There's still a lot of blood caked to her skin, but as far as he can tell, there's no wound anywhere that it could have come from. Brow furrowed, he leaves her under a bundle of blankets and fills up the kettle with water. Hanging it carefully over the fire, he walks over to the cabinet and fishes out a tin of cocoa from the top shelf. Hasn't been used in years, but should still be fine. He would make it with milk, but she's probably dehydrated. Lifting the kettle's lid with the poker, the rancher pours the brown powder inside and waits for it to boil. The little girl's eyes are open now. She's staring into the flames. Her lips are looking a little more pink, her skin a little more blotchy.
You're safe here. Just stay by the fire and warm up a bit. You like cocoa?
The little girl drags her eyes away from the flames. Her expression is mostly blank. She looks too tired to be confused.
I don't know. I think you will. Ma always gave me cocoa.
Okay. And with that, the farmhouse falls silent. The little girl stares into the fire. The rancher watches her, finally feeling the wave of exhaustion crashing over him. His ma has fallen asleep in her armchair. Only Maribel stays awake through the whole night, staying close to the little girl by the fire, occasionally licking her toes to try and warm them up. By the morning, the snow stopped, but the huge drifts remain. As the rancher walks across to the barn, he finds it hard to believe that just a few hours ago, the winds were whipping at his face as hard as they were. The world this morning is totally still. What the rancher finds even harder to believe is that there's a little girl in his house right now, fast asleep by the fire. He checked her forehead when he woke up this morning, and she miraculously hadn't caught a fever. She couldn't have been out in that weather for too long, but it only made the question more mysterious. Where did she come from? Maribel didn't get up this morning. From all of the excitement last night, she must have been too tired for today. Walking through the crisp morning air, he can't really blame her. He shoulders the barn door open. A column of steam curls out of the opening. All of that warmth, humidity, and cattle smell is strangely comforting this morning. But as the rancher goes around checking on all the cows inside, he very quickly discovers a problem. They're thin. Way too thin. Some of them look to be on the verge of starvation. He'd missed it last night as he drove them down in the dark, but in the warm glow of the barn's lights, it's unmistakable. These cows haven't been eating properly. He pours out several sacks of grain for them into the troughs, and they all gather around hungrily, filling both their stomachs as fast as they can. The rancher leans on the railing for a moment, confused. Even in this cold, there was still plenty of green grass for them up on the ridge. That's why he'd taken them up there. They should have had no trouble eating until the snow came in last night. He doesn't like this one bit. Last time Jorge had driven down and collected some of the meat, he'd had a few questions about the quantity being smaller than usual. Were the cows sick at all? Not that the rancher could tell. But now, looking at them, it's clear as day. Something's up.
You hungry?
The little girl nods. They sit across the table from one another, eating homemade bread and soup. Ma stays over by the fire. Maribel slowly wanders over to the kitchenette and flops down on the floor, exhausted.
Where are you from?
The girl shrugs her shoulders.
You know how you got out here? Remember anything from last night?
The little girl just eats her soup and shakes her head. She doesn't look particularly scared or worried, just a little confused.
Where are your parents? Do you have parents?
Again, the little girl shrugs. The rancher sits back and folds his arms. He's tried to call into town, but his phone line's gone out in the blizzard. Not much to be done until the snow clears. He's got a good relationship with the police around here. If he explains the situation, then it'll all be okay.
What do you know? Can you remember anything from last night?
It was dark. The girl slurps her soup. I was hungry. So hungry. Then I saw the light and I went towards that.
My car?
No. Well, yes, later on it was your car, but before it wasn't.
What was the light then? Where were you?
I don't know. It was just the light.
Now he's even more confused, but try as he might, the rancher can't figure any of it out, and try as she might, the little girl can't remember anything more precise than that. The pair of them hop into the car and drive back out up the road that afternoon. The snow is piled so high that the rancher is having to get out twice as often as he did the previous night to clear a track for them. He isn't actually sure what he's brought her out here looking for. Clues, maybe? He almost laughs at himself at the thought, but that's probably the best word for it. If he can figure out how she got here, then he can work on understanding who she is and how to get her home. There's the damage to the phone line. One of the masts has collapsed, sagging heavily on the lines. That's not something he can fix on his own. No, sir. Looks like he'll have to wait for the snow to melt before making any phone calls again. That could be in 1 week. That could be in 3 months. He glances at the child sitting in the passenger seat. She's just staring out of the window in amazement, wrapped up in as many layers as he could put on her. They may be stuck together for a while. A lurch. The pickup plunges dangerously to the left. The rancher slams on the brakes and it comes to a stop just in time. A large chunk of snow in front of them comes loose and slips off the side of the road. It tumbles down into a gully that he hadn't even spotted. With all this snow on the ground, he has no frame of reference. Everything is just white. Stay here. The rancher opens the door and climbs out. He wishes Maribel was with him, but she'd wanted to stay home again. Poor dog. She must really be going through it if she wasn't even up for a ride in the pickup. Carefully as he can, testing every step before making it, the rancher creeps over to the edge of the gully. It's bigger than he thought, much bigger. It continues down, more and more sharply for a few hundred feet, all the way down into a... Oh no. There's a semi down there, a big rig, warped and bent, lying on the rocks. Just a glance is enough to tell the rancher it's Jorge's, but he just keeps staring at it in disbelief. Can't be. But it is. Stay in the car. The rancher reaches past the little girl and into the back seat. Grabbing a pair of crampons and some rope, he straightens up and looks at the girl. She knows it's serious. He can see the concern on her face. Stay in the car, he repeats. By the time the rancher makes it down to the truck, his legs and back are killing him. All this work over the last 24 hours is going to start taking its toll sooner or later, but some things have to be done. He pauses by the semi. It's on its side. He'll have to climb up onto it and try to open the door. Some things have to be done. He hoists himself up and manages to clamber onto the metal door. It's badly crumpled, and the window is smashed in. He doesn't fancy his chances of being able to get it open. One look through the window shows him that he won't want to do that anyway. Blood coats every inch of the inside of Jorge's truck. The cabin that the rancher is so used to seeing and sitting in is almost unrecognizable. Smashed glass is sprinkled across every surface with a dark brownish-red layer of gore frozen into everything else. There, in the midst of it all, still wearing a seatbelt, is Jorge's body. It dangles like a limp carcass at a butcher shop, like the cows he hangs in the slaughterhouse. And like those cows, a large chunk of Jorge is missing. His fat stomach is gone, not just cut open, but gone. The tops of his thighs, too, and much of his chest. So much of him is just missing. Open arteries and lifeless nerves dangle in place. That must have been a hell of a crash. The rancher reaches over and pulls Jorge's cap down over his eyes. Not much else to be done right now. No way he can clean this mess up by himself. But as the rancher climbs up the valley, his mind starts to connect some dots that leave a sick feeling in his stomach. He's seen that much blood somewhere else, or rather, on someone else, just last night. He slams the door to the pickup shut and starts to drive back down the track. Since the snow stopped, all of the drifts that he'd cleared earlier remain clear. It's only a few minutes' drive back down to the farm. He doesn't say a word the whole way, and neither does the little girl. She clearly senses something's up. The sick feeling in his stomach remains. He pulls up the handbrake, and the two of them sit in silence outside the farmhouse. There's a truck in that valley. Did you know that?
Yes?
Is that where you came from last night?
I don't remember.
Was he... The rancher stops. Jorge didn't have any kids. What were you doing in his truck?
I don't know.
Was he...
The rancher can't bring himself to accuse his best friend of the words that almost left his mouth.
Do you think you might not remember because something bad happened to you?
I don't know. The rancher closes his eyes for a long moment. Silence fills the pickup.
Come on, let's get inside.
But inside wasn't the safe haven he'd been hoping for. Ma's been throwing up. Not just once, but a few times. She's distressed, groaning aimlessly for someone to come and save her. Maribel is pacing around the room, yelping and whining. The rancher immediately goes upstairs to get some rags to clean up with. Perfect timing, as usual. But he stops in his tracks when he comes back down. His ma stopped moaning. The little girl is kneeling by the armchair, holding the old lady's hand. The room is calm. The little girl gently places the frail hand back on the armrest and comes over to take the rags from the rancher. Returning to the old lady, the girl goes about mopping her up as best she can. Maribel slumps back down on the floor. And that is how the four of them exist for the next few days. Ma gets sicker steadily, but the little girl stays by her side all day long, caring for her in every way. The rancher's glad of that. It gives him the time he needs to help his cows outside. None of them are in a good shape. Whatever it is, they're still getting thinner. He feeds them all the grain they'd normally need, and then some, and they always finish it off. Yet none of them are getting any fatter. The rancher leans on the railing, trusty dog by his side. His energy is starting to really lag behind what he needs. The last couple of days, even though he hasn't done all that much, have totally taken it out of him.
What do you think it is, Maribel?
He looks down at his little friend. She's looking thinner too, actually, but she's been eating just fine. It hits him. Tapeworms. As soon as the word comes into his head, it makes total sense. His cows, his entire herd by the looks of things, have been riddled with tapeworms.
Oh, hell.
He hasn't got anywhere near the amount of medicine needed to give some to all of them. Even if he did, a lot of them are looking pretty far gone. The chance of reinfection would be high. He needs supplies. He needs Jorge. Maribel whines softly next to him. He knows what they have to do. Laying Maribel down carefully by the fire, the rancher administers the tapeworm medicine. For a few hours, they lie there together. He strokes her side, waiting for her to pass it. The little girl watches over his shoulder. His ma sits back in her chair, mumbling to herself. He hasn't talked to the little girl anymore about Jorge yet. He isn't sure what there is to say. Maybe he should ask if Jorge was sick. After all, the cows clearly have had these tapeworms since before the other night. Jorge may have picked up contaminated meat from him last time he came. Maybe. Maribel passes the worm on the rug. Ugh, the smell. The rancher uses the tongs next to the fire to pick the worm up. It's long and pale. And dead. He tosses it into the fire and puts the tongs in the flames for a bit to sterilize them. The worm sizzles and pops in the flames. The sound makes his stomach crawl. The rancher glances around and sees the little girl staring at the tapeworm. He looks past the girl to his ma sitting in the chair. Her turn next. But as that night and the following morning reveal, it's too late. His ma's groans turn into cries of pain. She openly sobs by the fire, clutching at her stomach. Every time the rancher tries to give her the medicine, she just vomits it back up. Each time she vomits, there's more and more blood mixed in. The little girl gets more and more upset. It's not fair on her to have to witness something this traumatic and disgusting. There's nowhere else for her to go. She shouldn't even be here at all. The fact that she is means she has to help. That's all there is to it. By sunrise, his ma has passed away. There is nasty red bruising all across her abdomen, which tells him she must have bled out internally from this worm. He'd been too late to realize what was wrong. Too late with the cows, and too late with his ma. He covers his ma with a blanket and tells the little girl not to go and wash her hands. He needs to check on the cattle. Sure enough, during the night, a handful of them died too. The calves. They were the ones to go first whenever something like this happened. Mother cows stood over their calves, licking their heads, willing them to wake up. The rancher drags each body out to the back and burns them. He can't risk any more contamination. As the carcasses burn, he allows himself to cry. But when the rancher comes back into the house, it's full of noise, a noise that takes his brain a long time to comprehend. Crying, but not his own, not the little girl either. No, it was a new sound. It was a baby, a newborn child screaming at the top of its lungs. The rancher can't believe what he's looking at. The little girl is sitting at the hearth with Maribel at her feet. In her arms, drenched in blood, is a baby. The girl looks up at him and smiles sweetly. It's a boy. Then she turns around to his ma's body under the blanket. A sickening red patch soaks through the fabric, right over where her stomach would be. What the hell happened here?
I've got a little brother.
Securing and containing SCP-1003 has proven challenging. This is largely because the tapeworm that causes all of this damage is virtually indistinguishable from Echinococcus granulosus, the common variety of tapeworm that causes hydatid disease. The tapeworm, designated SCP-1003-1, follows the same life cycle as other regular worms. Its eggs come into contact with an animal through contaminated meat, saliva, or unclean surfaces and are ingested. Once inside the gut, they grow and latch onto the inside of the digestive tract, where they feed on the nutrients of the food traveling past them, steadily growing bigger and stronger. Once mature, they lay eggs, which pass out in the animal's excrement to continue the process. Infections spread quickly, particularly in unsanitary conditions amongst livestock, and can often be difficult to contain, as by the time the symptoms, nausea, weight loss, fever, start to manifest in the infected, the worms have likely already reproduced and have a new generation growing in the guts of other animals. As far as the Foundation is aware, SCP-1003 follows this normal pattern in all observed animals except humans. When a human ingests an egg from this tapeworm, a very different creature starts to grow in their gut. Human embryos, with the same genetic code as the tapeworm, begin to form. The rate of their growth is greatly accelerated, however. By just 8 weeks, they are as mature as the typical 3-week-old neonate or newborn child, although similar in size to an 8-week-old embryo at 13 to 16 centimeters. Many eggs usually enter this fertilization period, but almost all of them die before having a chance to develop much beyond the early stages. They stand the best chance of survival when buried in the hepatic tissue, where they can absorb plenty of nutrients from their host. The host at this point usually starts to experience mild symptoms, lethargy, the occasional stomach cramp, nothing particularly severe. Yet, the embryos that survive soon develop rows of temporary, razor-sharp teeth. At this point, passively absorbing nutrients is no longer enough for them. They bury their teeth into the soft tissue surrounding them and begin to eat. Once they enter this stage, their rate of growth increases exponentially the more flesh they consume. Eventually burrowing out into the world, the tapeworm child is born drenched in blood. The size and apparent age of the child that emerges from the corpse are determined by the size of the person they consume. For example, the child eating its way out of the rancher's maw appeared to be only a 10-month-old child, as there was very little of the frail old woman for it to eat. By contrast, the little girl who emerged from Orhe's gut had plenty of fat to feast on, and so was able to grow to the size of a 9-year-old. Once the child emerges, the teeth that they'd used to eat their way out quickly become loose and are replaced by regular human teeth. The children themselves have no memory at all of where they've come from or what they are. They have the same motor and linguistic skills that a regular child would possess at their age. Nothing, aside from their DNA, marks them out as being any different from the children around them, blissfully ignorant, just like the children around them. It is theorized that many of these children end up in orphanages. With no birth certificates or identifiable parents, they fall through the gaps in the system, quickly lost to the world. The only way to really track them at all is to follow the infections they cause. You see, these tapeworm children have one final curse they must live with. Their bodily fluids, their saliva, and sweat contain the same tapeworm protoscolex that will develop into SCP-1003-1 as soon as it is ingested by another creature, making the cycle start all over again. If you want to track down a tapeworm child, and I highly advise that you don't, all you have to do is follow the trail of nasty stomach infections, internal bleeding, and freak pregnancies amongst the outcasts of society. It, unfortunately, will not take long. There are currently 10 instances of SCP-1003-2 in containment. The children live in Bioresearch Area 13 under strict supervision. Researchers are only permitted to enter their cells whilst wearing full-body biohazard suits, but first must have Level 4 security clearance and must have written permission, and can only enter with specific research goals agreed upon. All staff are regularly tested for the presence of any kind of tapeworms in their system. No other animals are permitted in this facility.
The store manager had heard of crazy customers, but this was something else. A mob comes barreling towards the store, visible through the display windows as they charge down the street. They all look crazed, much closer in appearance to rabid animals than human beings, frenzying, foaming at the mouth. A few of them stumble in their haste while rushing for the automatic sliding doors. Some fall to the ground, only for others to clamber over them, leaping like athletes going over hurdles, with all the same speed, but with none of the grace. To the staff inside the store, They look like a pack of zombies, all apparently infected by the same virus that had given them such a ravenous hunger. For savings! I thought Black Friday was a week ago, the trainee remarks as the doors slide open and the first of the mob spills inside. Welcome to the Mattress Madness Megastore, everyone. If you could kindly form an orderly... Within seconds, the trainee vanishes as a tidal wave of maddened mattress store customers starts to pile into the store. Each and every one of them is deranged. That much is clear, even from a distance. Across the store manager watches as his colleagues are shoved and tackled out of the way, just from their misfortune of standing too close to the entrance. It's only as one of the mob wanders closer that the store manager notices their eyes. Both lids stay shut, somehow closed, despite the crazed customer standing upright. They aren't screwed tightly. It's clear this person isn't forcefully keeping their eyelids clamped down. Instead, they're gently sealed as if the customer is still asleep or sleepwalking. The whole situation was astounding. First thing in the morning, just at opening time, a horde of sleepwalking customers barged their way into the Mattress Madness Megastore, moving and fighting retail staff as if they were all still awake and fully aware. And as if that isn't bizarre enough, it quickly turns out these people aren't here because they're eager not to miss out on great deals on their bedroom furniture. To the store manager's horror, the mob has come to the Mattress Madness Megastore for breakfast. He watches an elderly woman, eyes closed, shuffle up to a luxury cashmere pillow-top California king-size mattress and proceed to eat it. And not bite by bite either, not even ripping off pieces to chomp through like so much cotton candy. In a far more horrifying fashion, the old lady eats the mattress whole. The store manager feels his blood run cold at the sight of her mouth widening unnaturally, unhinging like a snake eating its prey. Except in this bizarre, unaired nature documentary, the snake is a human being, and its meal is a perfectly good bed that moments before had been resting on a stylish ottoman frame. The same exact display of confusing carnage is unfolding all over the Mattress Madness Megastore, people devouring entire Egyptian cotton mattresses. Some had even already devoured their respective meals and were already moving on to any accompanying pillows or cushions, feeding on them in much the same way. The few members of staff bold enough to try and intervene couldn't seem to wake the sleepwalking shoppers up, no matter how hard they gripped each one by the shoulders and shake. Nothing could deter them from devouring divans and munching on memory foam. A sudden, terrifying, and inescapable thought cuts through all the confusion, striking the store manager with an even greater fear. The stock room. Behind a series of doors, marked with signs reading "Employees Only," are shelves upon shelves of new units. The Mattress Madness Megastore being a much bigger outlet means that there's additional inventory to replace any mattresses on the shop floor that gets sold. And more mattresses mean more food for the mob. The worry that these sleepwalkers might soon develop a taste for human flesh never occurs to the store manager. He hurriedly races around the store, gathering up as many of his surviving staff as he can, and urges them to help him defend the stock in the back room. Some are already abandoning their posts, ripping name tags off their polo shirt uniforms and rushing to leave the store. They aren't willing to die for $7.25 an hour. The Mattress Madness Megastore has insurance. It'll cover the damaged stock once the crazed customers have feasted on feather beds, but the manager urges them to stay. The store's insurance covers stock that is damaged in transit, not mattresses that are eaten by hungry lunatics. A few stay, using the manager's desperation to leverage pay raises and more annual vacation days in exchange for their help during this crisis of cashmere carnivory. With his resistance force gathered, the store manager commands the remaining employees to charge for the door at the back of the store, but some of the nearby mattress eaters overhear in their sleepwalking state. The staff freeze, uncertain whether to bolt for the stockroom and risk being chased by the hungry customers. They need a distraction, a sacrificial lamb to grab the horde's attention. And with a solemn expression, the store manager realizes what he must do. This isn't a fight he'll make it out of alive. He leaps up onto a twin inner spring and calls out to the crazed customers. "Attention, everyone," he bellows. "I'd like to announce that all our mattresses are half off for the next 5 minutes." The crowd goes even more rabid, all eager to eat the pillowy pedestal the store manager is standing upon. His staff flees in the opposite direction, rushing to barricade themselves inside the storeroom while their boss meets a grisly demise, and the crazed customers devour every remaining mattress in sight. But what on earth could have possibly caused such a scene to unfold? What was the inciting incident for this unprecedented act of mass matricide, the Divan destruction, and combination carnage? All it took was one seemingly innocuous image, an unassuming online post, to stir over 7,000 people into a featherbed feeding frenzy. It's December the 3rd, 2020, almost an entire day before the deranged events that would soon unfold at the Mattress Madness megastore. And just like he does most days after college, the student is trawling various internet forums in search of things to laugh at. He's procrastinating, and through inaction, allowing himself to be buried under a veritable avalanche of assignments, all with rapidly approaching dates that they're due in by. But he doesn't care. He can always do them tomorrow. As far as he's concerned, there's plenty of time for him to waste doing, well, very little. But no matter where he looks, nothing brings with it even the smallest hit of dopamine. It's been hours since he stopped checking the clock at the bottom right-hand corner of his computer screen, instead wearing out the muscles of his finger as it spins the scrolling wheel of his mouse. His social media feed is all the same, more doom and gloom, and despite his searching, he can't find anything funny to alleviate his ongoing existential nightmare for so much as a second. If anything, seeing every anxiety-inducing post about the state of the world, or dour headlines of reposted news articles, only makes everything worse. That is, until the fateful link appears in his inbox. It's from one of his friends at college, living in the dorm across campus. The pair of them constantly swapped links and exchanged memes over direct messages, sometimes while sitting in the middle of important lectures. So the student quickly opens up the latest message from his friend, pleased to have something to relieve the monotony instilled by the prior several hours' worth of mindless scrolling. Sure enough, his friend's message sits waiting to be read in his inbox. It's just a single blue hyperlink with no additional context offered, nothing to indicate what the link is or what website it leads to, or even why the student's friend bothered to send it. They're long past the need to provide context for the memes they send each other. The link redirects to a familiar corner of the internet to the student, the deep-fried memes subreddit. Just seeing that written in the hyperlink is enough to spur an enthusiastic click. It's like going home, back to somewhere warm and welcoming, where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came, and where the student knows he's bound to find something to entertain himself. A deep-fried meme is usually a heavily edited image with a number of different filters added to it. Its contrast is boosted, the picture is oversaturated and distorted, all to the point wherein the colors are unnatural, and the image appears as a grainy, washed-out mess of pixels. And they're one of the student's favorite subgenre of funny posts. Opening up the link sent by his friend, he finds one such deep-fried meme staring back at him. It depicts a man, long-haired and wearing dark clothes, presumably a fan of heavy metal music. In front of the metalhead is a table with a chessboard placed neatly atop it. The pieces on the board are distributed in such a way that places the metalhead in checkmate, and his opponent? Directly opposite him at the table is a glass bowl filled with water and a goldfish aimlessly swimming around. And to top off this Louvre-worthy masterpiece is text, seemingly cut and paste from various different places, judging by the alternating fonts and styles. The words have been placed into a sentence that reads, "Tell me your secrets, fish." And the student explodes with laughter. As if answering his prayers for some humorous entertainment to avoid working on his college assignments, his friend had appeared out of the blue and delivered a perfect deep-fried meme. But that momentary boost in serotonin levels quickly subsides, and the student knows how these exchanges work. This has to be reciprocal, a mutual trading of memes, like for like, akin to swapping trading cards in the playground at a younger age. And so he searches the subreddit for a token worthy of returning to his friend. He clicks on a search filter, sorting the results from the top posts of all time to the most recent posts of the day. These were fresh, hot off the presses, or out of the deep fryer in this case. And the newer they were, the lower the chances that his friend had already seen them. Scrolling through, the student is met with a few underwhelming attempts that weren't worthy of the prestige expected by the deep-fried meme subreddit. They'd be better suited for posting on r/cringe. But then, it appears, the perfect, deep-fried, crispy golden brown, cooked to perfection picture to send back to his friend. The distorted image is a photograph of a bed, specifically a king-size mattress, on what looks like a polished wooden bed frame, although it's not easy to tell thanks to just how grainy the picture has been made. Whoever edited this meme knew what they were doing, and has nailed the absurdist, bizarre humor that the student and his friend thrive on. A label over the mattress simply reads, "King size," and the meme is captioned in a classic top text, bottom text format with the phrase, "A feast fit for a king." And the pièce de résistance, the crowning touch that makes this meme worthy of the students' lofty standards, is the title given to it by the original poster. It sums up the meme perfectly, succinctly in 3 words: "Eat your mattress." The student erupts into uncontrollable fits of laughter, so much so that tears start to stream down his face. His stomach almost feels like it might explode at just how fine he thinks the post he's found is. Through giggles that hit like the aftershock of an earthquake, he copies the link to the Eat Your Mattress meme into a message and hits send to share the hilarity with his friend. Little does he know, he's just condemned his friend to the same fate that now awaits him. As soon as he falls asleep, it'll happen. And the student and his friend aren't the only ones either. The post spreads, either sent directly from one person to another or seen by those just browsing the Deep Fried Meme subreddit and happening across the Eat Your Mattress photo. Not all of them find it funny. They don't have to. They aren't even required to share it, to pass it on to someone else and help the post spread like wildfire. They've looked at it, and that's enough. Come the next day, an estimated 7,000 people across the world have seen the same meme, and it affects them all in the exact same way, becoming a directive, a command planted in their subconscious, one that they will act on without even realizing. It's been only a few hours since all the carnage erupted at the Mattress Madness megastore, but by now, the SCP Foundation has swept in and taken control of the scene. A cordoned section of multiple blocks, under the cover story of a dangerous gas leak. It's enough to keep civilians and prying eyes away without asking too many questions. But as for the Foundation personnel themselves, they've got plenty of unanswered questions of their own. 2 members of the cleanup team are reviewing the store's security footage, baffled by the sights of the chaos that unfolded there earlier that same morning. On the screen, frenzied customers are eating entire mattresses, stretching their mouths wide open and swallowing them whole. They watch as the store manager appears to make an attempt at a noble sacrifice to distract the horde of ravenous customers so his employees can rush towards the storeroom. But the manager is fine. Once the horde has eaten all the mattresses out on the store's main floor, they start trying to break into the stockroom out back, where the other employees have used layers upon layers of cellophane-wrapped mattresses to barricade the door. By the time the Foundation arrives, the customers have already forced their way into the stockroom and have devoured around half of the mattresses while exhausted employees try to wake them from their sleepwalking state. The Foundation sees to it that everyone affected is rapidly administered with memory-wiping amnestics to forget all about the ordeal. Their next job is to try and track down the source of whatever caused this unprecedented outbreak of mattress eating. But being experts in all things anomalous, it doesn't take the Foundation long to start pursuing possible explanations. Having already confirmed this wasn't a viral anomaly, their next course of action is to investigate possible mimetic causes, and sure enough, a common factor quickly presents itself. The mob that attacked the Mattress Madness megastore, along with subjects who have engaged in similar acts of mattress eating across the world, all have one thing in common. Each one has been exposed to the Eat Your Mattress post on the Deep Fried Meme subreddit. It takes some deduction on the Foundation's part to figure out the cause. After all, the meme in question is similar to a number of others posted in the same subreddit. As a result, the Foundation's online detection software, or web crawlers, initially fail to flag the mattress meme as an anomalous image. Once they do, it is designated as SCP-5126. But with a cause established, the pieces start to fit together. The Foundation's researchers soon realize what the image does. Another reason it was initially missed is that its effects only occur once the subject that has seen it falls asleep. The student is one such subject who lived through this. He dozes off in his gaming chair well past the middle of the night, hours after he's first seen SCP-5126. While sound asleep, without waking up once, he starts to seek out his mattress, laying unoccupied on his bed on the other side of his cramped dorm room. He and all the others who have seen SCP-5126 then consume their mattresses, including in many cases their pillows, any cushions, and even plush toys. Their bodies stretch unnaturally to accommodate the meal, only to return to normal once they have done the deed. Having returned to normal, the student and the others like him remain unaware they've just eaten a mattress. But the Foundation is left puzzled. There's still one question that hasn't been answered. Their examination of the several hundred customers at the Mattress Madness megastore revealed that the consumed mattresses aren't digested like food ordinarily is. They vanish without a trace. So this naturally begs the question, where are all these eaten mattresses going? Well, the Foundation quickly comes up with an experiment to find out. They place tracking devices inside of the cell of a member of D-Class personnel and expose him to SCP-5126. Sure enough, the meme takes effect, and once asleep, he eats his mattress. The experiment is going exactly as the Foundation planned. Now they can follow the signal from the tracking devices to pinpoint the destination that all the consumed mattresses are disappearing to. And after several sweeps of the Earth's surface, their satellites discover a ping coming from a remote location in the state of Montana. MTF Sigma-16 suit up, ready to head out to the location. This mobile task force operates under the codename Slumber Party, and it's up to them to investigate. They come across a large structure. It looks a lot like a medieval castle, but it has been built out of mattresses and large cushions. It's the ultimate pillow fort. It even has pillars and all the fortifications you'd expect from a real historical castle, all made out of even more pillows. The Slumber Party team enters the fort and quickly discovers that the structure is able to anomalously reconstruct itself. Sigma-3 kicks over a stack of pillows and plush toys arranged to resemble a statue and watches as it reforms after collapsing. The team ventures deeper into the pillow fort and is quickly met with humanoid entities that are also made out of pillows. An entity swipes a pillow arm at Sigma-1, but she ducks out of the path of the attack. Drawing her firearm, she fires, causing a plume of feathers to spray out of the pillow person. The entity is unfazed, and several additional shots do nothing. Even a taser is ineffective. The pillow entities are exhibiting extreme resistance to damage, but Sigma-2 has an idea. She grabs a pillow from one of the walls and uses it to bash the entity attacking her teammate Sigma-1. The pillow person collapses into a pile on the floor, inanimate, and just like that, the mobile task force has a way to fight back. They all grab pillows and make quick work of their attackers before they move on to explore the rest of the castle. Then they encounter the king. There is a man sitting atop a large stack of cushions, wearing a nightcap and pajamas, eating feathers from an expensive brand of pillow. Scattered around him are empty pillowcases. Trying to ignore the smell, the Slumber Party team attempts to interrogate him. He claims to be the king of cushion, obsessed with pillows since a young age. Their smell, taste, and texture inspire him to create a kingdom of plush, his masterpiece of mattresses. It doesn't take very long for the Foundation operatives to realize that this man is insane. They question him about how SCP-5126, the Eat Your Mattress meme, works. How is it able to make people consume entire mattresses and send them to the king's cushiony castle? And why? Well, the king explains that buying mattresses is expensive, so in order to build his castle, he's outsourced the gathering of building materials. As he sees it, he is offering people affected by the meme a delicious meal in exchange for their beds, spreading the world of pillows so he can gather resources for his kingdom. Suddenly, he challenges the Slumber Party team to a pillow fight for having tracked him down. The King of Cushion takes up a pillow in one hand and charges towards the mobile task force, armed and ready to do battle with them all. He is quickly incapacitated by Sigma-1's taser and drops to the floor defeated. Now designated SCP-5126-A, the King of Cushion is transported back to the SCP Foundation for analysis and containment. Their testing reveals he possesses no anomalous properties whatsoever, and the king actually requires his stomach to be pumped thanks to the copious amounts of pillow feathers he's been eating. The Foundation gets to work dismantling his pillow fort and moving all the components into storage. And as for the Eat Your Mattress meme itself, the Foundation's web crawlers are keeping an eye out for any other posts of the anomalous image. And don't worry, if you find yourself giggling at a funny deep-fried image that jokingly implies you should eat your mattress, the Foundation will ensure you don't remember it happening, and they'll even throw in a replacement for your swallowed mattress at no added cost. Now that's a bargain. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like 15 best SCP stories that will blow your mind.